Reminder that we are. Reminder that we are.
I started the live stream. Let me know when you're ready for me to start the webinar.
Great.
You ready for me to start the webinar?
Yeah, Shakura will be joining in 5, but we're able to get started.
Okay, I'm going to start the webinar now.
Good evening. My name is Leah Cruzy. I am the chair of the DC Public Charter School Board. Thank you for joining us this evening. I would like to welcome my fellow board members and colleagues, including Vice Chair Jim Sandman, Treasurer Chantel Wright, Carissa Stanley Beatty, Dwight Davis, and in a few minutes, Nick Rodriguez will join, as well as Secretary Shakura Adamafanian. There are several items on this evening's board agenda, one of which I would like to highlight. Following public comment, we will hear about DC PCSB's Qualitative Site Reviews, or QSRs. DC PCSB developed the QSR initiative to evaluate schools' environment and instructional quality. The QSR is intended to provide a snapshot of overall quality, not to evaluate individual teachers. The process includes a team conducting unannounced school visits and selecting a random sample of classrooms. In addition, the QSR team collects and reviews 5 English Language Arts, or ELA, and 5 math assignments to assess students' access to rigorous and relevant grade level work. The QSR team produces a final report containing a qualitative assessment for each campus within the LEA. Tonight, we will learn more about the purpose, protocol, and impact of QSRs. We will also review QSR data from the school years 22-23, which is 2 years ago, if that helps, and 23-24, which is this past school year prior to the one we're in now. And now I would like to turn the mic over to Dr. Walker Davis, who I know is not feeling 100% this evening. So thank you for being here tonight for tonight's meeting, despite feeling a bit under the weather.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy, and do excuse my voice. Late last month, our city released the 2024 DC CAPE results, which were sobering to say the least. The results confirm what we at DC PCSB and school leaders have seen across the district, that the pandemic has had lingering effects on student proficiency. These results reinforce to me and all of us why initiatives and tools like Aspire, our academic evaluation system, are so important. Aspire will help us focus on those areas which need greater attention. It will emphasize and help us achieve excellent schools for all students, particularly those from communities which have been historically marginalized. There is much to be done, but I believe that we, as the public charter school community in the district, owe it to our students to evaluate our work and refine and develop our strategies and tools to continually improve the quality of our education. Public education is a team effort. Families, for example, trust us, but need to make sure their student shows up for school. School leaders and LEA school boards set the direction and are responsible for managing and operating schools which provide quality instruction, a safe and healthy environment, and a fun and positive atmosphere. And the teams at the schools, teachers, nurses, bus drivers, crossing guards, and so many more, are essential to providing the educational experience. And we at the DCPCSB have our important role too, with oversight responsibilities and setting the standard for the public charter sector to strive toward. Together, we ensure that students in the district receive a quality education. At DCPCSB, we take our responsibility seriously. That's why we are currently reviewing and implementing practices and policies to upgrade and strengthen our oversight. This includes our evaluation tools like Aspire approved this past June, as well as making adjustments to our financial oversight. Just as the action of one LEA affects us all, we know that our work on Eagle Academy PCS highlighted areas on which we as the authorizer need to double down and where we have already begun to focus. These areas include financial oversight, LEA board governance, and effective organizations. Over the coming board meetings, we will have more public discussions and make important necessary changes to our oversight practices and policies. Before I close, I want to give an update about the Eagle Academy Public Charter School Community. After the Eagle Board decided to relinquish its charter and close its school, we moved quickly to host enrollment and job fairs. I am pleased to say that almost 90% of former Eagle students have enrolled in either public or public charter schools in the district. Our enrollment specialists are continuing to follow up with those who have not enrolled elsewhere to find them new schools. Additionally, many of our schools and DCPS have hired, are interviewing, and/or have extended offers to former Eagle staff. Indeed, there are important lessons learned from the Eagle Academy experience, which we believe has and can inform and strengthen our oversight. We will work closely, my team and this board, on this topic. Thank you very much, Chair Cruzy. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker-Davis. There are no registered public comment speakers on tonight's agenda, so this concludes the public comment portion of our agenda. And next, we will move to discuss our planned public hearing items. And for that, I will yield the floor to Travis Hartberger, Manager of School Quality and Evaluation, to introduce the first topic.
Good evening. Good evening, board members, fellow DC PCSB staff, and DC community in attendance. I'm Travis Hartberger. I'm the manager on the School Equity and Effectiveness team, also known as the C team, where I oversee the qualitative site review. Just to share some of my identities that I bring to the work, I'm a parent of school-age children. I have a third grader and a kindergartner, Charlie and NIA. And I'm a DC educator, having worked all of my education experience in DC public schools, teaching and leading and serving students all across the 8 wards of DC. So these identities ground my passion for ensuring equitable and excellent learning experiences in DC. So by the end of this presentation, we will develop a shared understanding of the qualitative site review, its purpose, protocol, and its impact. We'll also review QSR data from school years 22 and 23, as well as 23-24, looking ahead at the work that's coming up. So this presentation will really fall into 4 parts. First, we'll talk about the why of the QSR, its how, the impact of the QSR, and then we'll also look up what's coming up for the QSRs in the school year, and then I'll also take time to answer questions. So first, why do we do the QSR? Well, there's really 4 reasons. Oh, sorry, got ahead of myself. So our mission of DC PCSB is that DC public charter schools are environments where all students, especially those in historically marginalized groups, thrive. And so that mission really falls into 3 specific actions. And the QSR work supports all 3 of those. First, the QSR supports monitoring equity and academic excellence with the Danielson's framework for teaching. Second, the way that we share QSR findings with school leaders empowers their school improvement planning and professional development. And third, we aim to actively and authentically engage school leaders in the QSR. And we also seek ways to continue to make the findings of the QSR accessible to families and communities. I urge you to take a look out in the rest of this presentation for those 3 ways, those 3 actions, how they show up in the QSR work. So what is the QSR? Well, at PCSB, we really have three buckets of oversight: the academic, finance, and organization. The qualitative site review falls into the academic form of that work. And specifically in terms of our team, the school effectiveness piece, we look at the alignment between schools' academic outcomes and their QSR findings, because one of our goals is to determine look-fors and root causes for academic outcomes. So what are the reasons for a QSR? Well, there's really four. The two most common ones are what the board may be most familiar with, which is charter review and renewal. And in context of review and renewal, the QSR is one of the only sources of qualitative data that showcases students' real-time learning experience at that particular school or LEA. Schools also, if they have a condition, receive off-cycle QSRs, and that provides additional instructional quality snapshots to monitor their improvement. And then lastly, for schools that are in their first year of operation, we offer a soft or practice QSR to help them set up for success for a 5-year review. Okay, the QSR is a holistic snapshot of instructional quality that includes 3 parts. First, we conduct classroom observations of 75% of core content classrooms. During those observations, the QSR team gathers qualitative evidence using the Danielson framework, specifically in domains 2 and 3, classroom environment and instruction. Additionally, the QSR collects and reports on implementation of the specialized instruction, specifically special education and emerging multilingual learner programs. And then lastly, or the third piece, the QSR looks at students' opportunity to access grade level content. Specifically, we use 5 ELA and 5 math assignments using the New Teacher Project or TNTP assignment review protocol. And then the team produces a final report containing an overall assessment for each campus's performance. So the how. What does the QSR look like for a school or an LEA? So the engagement with school leaders with the QSR really starts the year before their review or their renewal process. And the life cycle of the QSR really starts in the summertime, and we have a QSR protocol training with each of those school leaders. Next, you'll see in the charts that we have QSR document submission, which really is the school leader's opportunity to provide the master schedule, teacher roster, program questionnaires, and work samples. And then specifically over the last couple of years, we've enhanced the questionnaires that ask about their special education and emerging multilingual learner programs. And that allows us to provide more robust observations and reporting on those programs. In addition, the QSR window occurs over 2 weeks. So that's basically 10 consecutive school days. And after that window, the QSR team processes the observation and assignment review data to synthesize the QSR report. One of the things that we've done over the last school year is to redesign the report so it highlights those same programs, the special education and emerging multilingual learners, again, highlighting the work with the Danielson framework that we've seen through the observations. So typically after 3 weeks of the QSR, the team leads a debrief of the findings with the school leaders. And you'll see in orange here, in this past school year, we developed a note catcher to help LEA leaders capture key takeaways during the debrief. We also increased the process time for LEA leaders to look at the QSR findings. This year, we're going to focus on how we adapt the QSR experience. We want it to be more interactive, and so we're going to empower LEA leaders to process and move to acting using the QSR findings to then develop their own school improvement and professional development plans. And then the last piece, we want to equip this year school leaders with resources to, again, get them to move from thinking to acting for their school improvement and professional development work. So we do have a little bit of data around the QSR debrief process and report. And here you see a pie chart that shows the distribution of LEA leaders that completed a survey related to the QSR. Most of those respondents you can see are principals and executive directors. And the response rate is 62.7%. So that's the percentage of responding sites for the last 2 years of QSRs. And specifically, the survey showed that 96.9 to 100% of school leaders agree on the QSR's clarity, as well as its alignment to its intended purpose, which is to inform the LEA's instructional improvement. Anecdotally, we also have noted specific instances where schools and LEAs have held all staff and leadership team meetings solely around their QSR findings. These anecdotes also align with the LEA leaders' agreement in the survey that the QSR informs their instructional growth. So with that, what is the impact of the QSR on school outcomes, and what's its impact on student achievement? So remember, there are 3 parts to the QSR, and this slide focuses on the assignment review. In 2020, we began using the task review in the QSR. This came out of the TNTP's Opportunity Myth publication, which looked at students' opportunity to access rigorous, relevant, and grade level work. Here you can see outcomes from the TNTP assignment review. The top row shows percentage of assignments that gave students sufficient opportunity to access grade level ELA work. And you see that 68.6% of assignments in school year 22-23 offered sufficient opportunity, whereas 76.5% in school year 23-24 offered sufficient opportunity. And then over the 2 years, the average is 72.7% of assignments offering sufficient opportunity to access grade level ELA work. The bottom row shows percent sufficient opportunity to access grade level math work. And you'll see 66.7% of assignments offer sufficient opportunity in school year 22-23, up to 78.3% in school year 23-24. And then the 2-year average of 72.7% of assignments offering sufficient opportunity to access grade level work in math. While the numbers show an increase, it also shows that an opportunity is similar in both content areas. And on average, 7 out of 10 assignments are on grade level.
Travis?
Yes,
It's Jim. Could I ask a question? Could you go back to the prior slide?
absolutely.
The ends, the numbers there for each year, 210 and 230. Number of what?
Assignments. So that means that in school year 22-23, we rated 210 assignments.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Moving on, the other part of the QSR, again, focuses on observations. And here you can see outcomes for the Danielson's framework for teaching, specifically looking at, again, domain 2, classroom environment, and domain 3, instruction. At the top for core content, you see the 2-year average is 2.91, which is just below proficient, and for the classroom environment. And you see that the 2-year average for instruction is 2.63, which is between basic and proficient. I'll come back to that number a little bit later as well. In terms of special education program quality, the 2-year average is 2.92, which again is just below proficient for a classroom environment. And an instruction is between basic and proficient at 2.62. And then lastly, at the bottom, you'll see in terms of emerging multilingual learner program quality, the 2-year average is 3.03, just above proficient in classroom environment, and 2.70, just below proficient in instruction. So a key takeaway here is that across classrooms, instruction domain outcomes are typically below those of the classroom environment. So some specific correlations. Here you'll see schools' QSR outcomes and their relationship to students' DCK proficiency. On the left, you see the QSR sector average for instruction, which I mentioned earlier is 2.63 between basic and proficient, and this is shown with a black dotted line. Below that in pink, you see LEAs 1, 2, and 3, where you see that they are above the QSR sector average, showing just above proficient in instruction. On the chart to the right, you see the state average for ELA proficiency is 34%, and that's shown with a blue dotted line. And you see the same 3 LEAs all scored above the ELA proficiency state average. In yellow, the yellow dotted line, you see the state average for math proficiency is 22%. 2 of those 3 same LEAs scored above the math proficiency in the state average. For me, this reinforces the validity of the QSR outcomes and student achievement. And even, On the converse of that, we have a similar relationship with below average outcomes. So here we see below average QSR outcomes do correlate with below average DCK proficiency. And again, on the left chart, you see LEAs 4, 5, and 6. They're shown in pink. They are all below the QSR sector average, which again was 2.63 or just above basic in instruction. On the right, you see the same 3 LEAs scored below the ELA and math proficiency state averages as well. And our last correlation here is focusing on a case study. So this is an example of how additional QSRs can impact proficiency. On the left, you see at the top the classroom environment for the first year of a conditioned school. Their QSR domain average classroom environment was 2.43, which is between proficient and basic. The following year, the classroom environment domain rating was 3.05, was just above proficient. And then in instruction, the first year they were at 2.00 or basic. The following year, they were just below proficient at 2.84. And then we see the school improving their environment instruction. We also see their students' proficiency increase. Looking at ELA first, they go from 27.5% to 38%, which is a 10.5 increase in proficiency in ELA. And then in math, lastly, you see going from 5.1% to 6.8%, which is a 1.7% increase over that 1 year as well. So we see that we know the effective instruction does produce student achievement. So looking ahead, what does this school year look like? So first, revisiting our mission and focusing on equitable and excellent teaching, we're going to continue piloting Danielson's 2022 version of the framework for teaching that centers equitable and culturally responsive teaching practices. And then lastly, this school year, we'll be looking at 45 QSRs across 18 LEAs, one of which you'll see is KIPP DC. You can see these on the right. So one of the differences this year is we have expanded the QSR schedule to 8 QSR windows, which would occur from now through the fall of 2025, again, to accommodate that volume of 45 compared to last year doing just 31 QSRs. We also, again, are enhancing the QSR report to highlight, again, that specialized instruction quality with special education and emerging multilingual learners. And we're also redesigning the QSR debrief to support leaders' effectiveness work. And with that, I will take your questions.
Thank you for this, Travis. I'll kick things off first, and board members, please let me know if you'd like to ask some questions. I have a couple technical ones here. I really appreciate this. And they're all over the place. So my first is, I see adult schools included here. My assumption is that the Danielson, so please correct me if my assumption is wrong, that the Danielson framework was initially designed for K-12. If my assumption is right, how do we adapt this to make sure it's relevant in an adult setting? And I have 2 more questions after that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we still use the Danielson framework, which you are correct. The emphasis has been on K-12 education. But one of the other things that we focused on is making sure that our roster of observers has experience in adult education. So even though they're using the same framework, they have the lens of adult education with that as well.
Great, thank you. And we're, as you may not remember the answer to this is 1B question. Do you remember the survey respondents? Did that include adult LEAs?
Yes, so there were 2 LEAs over the last 2 years, and one was Academy of Hope, which I think is on deck. And then Youth Build was the one from this last year.
Okay. My second question is, do we intend to monitor the correlation with learning outcomes in the future, particularly as we roll out Aspire? I'm just curious if, because the example you provided us was great, comparing against DC Cape, but of course that's one of many indicators of learning outcomes. So I'm curious, would we look at it across Aspire tiers? Yeah,
I think that's a great question. That's definitely things that we consider. I'm kind of a data guru, so I love looking at the data and seeing what's there. I think that's another way to triangulate and really see, does the qualitative information support the quantitative information as well?
And my last is actually a really small question, which is just clarifying the first area of domain is assignments that have been presented to students. So we're observing what material is presented to students, not production of student work, right? This is not, because we're assessing the rigor of and grade level content that is being presented to students.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. My stepdaughter is also asking me something at the same time. I think your question is what is the context around the assignments that we're looking at? Is that
Just remind me again, that first domain, the first one is assignments, the second one is environment or classroom environment, third is instruction. On that assignment review, we are asking for submission of examples of assignments that are presented to students.
Correct. Yes, we ask that there are assignments that are actually delivered to students. We do give them a time frame. We have tightened that, so we ask that the assignments like within a month of the document submission window. So, for example, if your school's undergoing QSR next week, you would ask that assignment is happening within a month of that time frame.
Thank you. I think Board Member Rodriguez goes next, and then Vice Chair Salmon has a question after that.
Great. Thank you so much. And Travis, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the work that you all do on QSRs. As you said, only qualitative data. I think it's a really important part of the picture when we do a whole bunch of things. I just have one question, which is there have been a few moments in the recent past with this board in which QSR findings, they haven't been the basis of sort of a go or no-go decision on a school, but they have kind of been on the margin, the basis of discussion about, say, an academic condition. Right. And I've often heard feedback from schools where they say, well, wait a minute, we don't use the Danielson framework for teaching. It's a different thing for us. And so that's just not valid. And why are we being judged by that? Right. And I guess you could say the same thing about the assignment review protocol or whatever. What would you suggest our posture should be towards those schools, given that this is our tool? Or do you think that over time the tool needs to incorporate more things to be flexible to the different contexts of different schools?
Yeah, so one second. Sorry, she's at it again. So I think there's really two pieces to that. First, my presentation was pretty focused. However, I do have a fair amount of data interacting with the LEAs to get their perspective around the framework. That was one of my first questions when I came to PCSB was, what are they using to observe classrooms, and how do you know that what we're using is like in alignment with that? And what we found is 3/4 of schools use the framework in some way. They might use it, like a quarter roughly use it prescriptively, like they basically adopt it. Another quarter use it in line with another tool. So they might use, for example, Montessori might use that, as well as DERS. And then the third example is using the framework as a guide to then create their own framework. But holistically, 75% of schools are using it in some way. And even schools that don't necessarily use it did articulate that what we use informs what they use to monitor their practice as well, just to have that alignment. And then the second piece of your question was around how can we adapt to be
should we? Maybe
Yeah.
your answer suggests that we shouldn't, and or that we should say, no, we actually think we should hold the line on that, as it were, right? I mean, that could also be an answer. I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah, so it is a great question. We have this beautiful responsibility to look at the quality of instruction for very different schools, right? That is a tough measure, to take a ruler that has different measurements for different types of programs. And I definitely get that. We've had lots of different LEAs, like, for example, this past school year that had an alternative model, and they used a completely different framework. So it was kind of out of their wheelhouse to think about the framework for teaching from Danielson.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a clean answer in terms of what it might look like moving forward. I think that it's really important that whatever it is, that we engage school leaders to make sure that we're not just coming across as exerting power, but we have their interest in mind, and that we do want to be able to have a common lens to look at good teaching across program types, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So my initial and my gut is to stay with a tool that we all have a fair understanding of. And LEA leaders do say that it's somewhere around 90% agree that that's good teaching from the framework, Danielson framework for teaching, but also making sure that if there are changes that we make, that we do engage them in that process so that they feel like they have a voice in what we do use.
Yeah, I mean, it'd probably be fair to say that some of that 75% has been shaped by us, by the fact that we use this, right, ourselves.
Mhm.
And so there's just something there around. I'd love to be able to not have that as kind of the friction or the excuse when we're reviewing a school. If you were to tell me, for example, hey, there's another framework, and it's kind of like the SAT and the ACT, and we should be proficient in both, then I'd be interested in that. But if there isn't, right, then I think then it's a question of making do with what we've got right now. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Salmon.
Thank you for the excellent presentation, Travis. I have questions about the way in which the feedback is delivered to the LEA and what the follow-up is thereafter. How long does it take you to get back to a school after a QSR? When you do, who is it who gets the feedback? Who are the people who are in the meeting or receiving whatever written communications you make? How specific is it? So if, for example, you've concluded that the quality of the assignments isn't giving students or some students an opportunity to engage in rigorous work, you give examples, specific examples of where you think assignments fell short, and do you give examples of what might have been a better assignment? At the end of the process, after you've delivered your feedback, is there any subsequent follow-up with the school sometime later to see how they've acted on the feedback that you gave them?
It's a great series of questions. So I just want to make sure I have them in the right order. So I think the first one is how quickly do we get the report to them? So there's two answers to that. First, as I shared earlier, the debrief for the QSR usually happens within the third week from the end of their window. So if their window ended this week, then within 3 weeks of that Friday, we would have a debrief with the school leaders. In terms of who engages, we open that up to anyone on their leadership team. So whether that's an instructional coach that's over ELA and math and does the work with the assignment review, we leave it open to them. So it's an open Zoom invite. They can forward it to as many staff members as they like. We have had schools that had upwards almost 20 folks on the call. So we invite that. We think the more the merrier. And the more people that have a stake in whatever they're doing, that's really important that they're there to hear it. The piece about the report, our target is usually by 12 weeks out from the QSR window, they have the report in hand. So that usually goes directly to their executive director and their board chair. 12 weeks is the hard deadline. It usually gets to them before that, but that's our commitment to them, is that we'll get it to them by 12 weeks. It's usually between 8 to 10. And then I've forgotten your last part of the question. Sorry.
What kind of follow-up is there thereafter to see whether they've acted on the lessons learned from the QSR?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the slightly double-edged sort of authorizing, right? We want to give feedback, but we also still need to offer them autonomy, right? We don't want to be prescriptive in what they do. So in the case where the school has an improvement plan, we're definitely going to ask to see if there's alignment there, but there isn't a requirement per se to submit anything after that. It really rolls into their review or renewal summary that goes into their review or renewal report.
I have a suggestion. When you issue your written report, I think it should go to all board members and not just the board chair. My experience is that some board chairs share information like that, others don't. I think every board member should be given that information. But my experience is not in this setting, but in an analogous setting.
I hear you. I appreciate that.
Treasurer Wright.
Hey, Travis. I have a few questions. So the first, I want to go back to the explicit purpose of the QSR and for you to connect directly for the board and for the public how QSR results are used and what that means, how the QSR is used within our own accountability or an evaluation standards.
Yeah, so the intent, as I know it, is that the QSR informs, qualitatively speaking, a holistic snapshot of the instruction that is then informing their charter review or renewal process. So we have achievement outcomes, we have those quantitative data points. The QSR serves as that qualitative triangulation, if you will, to connect the dots between those for the review and renewal process.
So if I am an LEA and quantitatively I've met my goals, but according to the QSR, for whatever reason, understanding how these happen qualitatively, I did not, what happens? What is the weight and purpose then of the QSR?
I mean, it's what it's really providing is summarizing what the student experience is. There's the data points tell you how the students are achieving, right? Their proficiency, but there's no part of a report for renewals or reviews that says what does the teaching look like from the student's perspective. So for me as a DC educator, as a parent, that's where I see a lot of the value in it. A parent, a family, they can see that information to see what does the teaching look like at the school, not just like what are the outcomes from the students the year before, but what does the quality of the instruction look like? And that's, I think the difference is that it's not just another data point that adds to the review or renewal. It is a different lens that offers, this is what students are seeing. I see that every 2 weeks where kids are having a great experience or they're not. That's something that we don't see in a percentage proficiency rate, if that makes sense.
Okay. And so just to be clear, if you have a poor QSR in terms of accountability, there is no direct or is there a direct correlation to our response as an authorizer regarding their charter?
So I think your question is saying, is there a direct correlation between the QSR and Aspire or accountability? Or
Well, and we'll have Aspire eventually, right? But we don't have Aspire now. I'm trying to make sure that we fully understand. I understand our intended purpose of why we're doing it. It gives us a qualitative what's actually happening in the schools. I want to make sure that we all understand how it plays out for an LEA.
yeah, and well, I think the answer is that it's not a one size fits all model. For example, like there's different standards that they may meet and there's others that they do not. And if we think back to like NACSA, who's the framer of how we think about charter authorizing, we really have to think about it as indicators of distress. There's not just one thing. We need to consider the whole picture. And I think the QSR does support that. There may be instances where attendance may vary and their QSR scores may vary as well. So I think it's offers a fuller picture than just to say that we would make a decision solely on one, if that makes sense.
Okay. And that's why I want to get it on. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm literally trying to make sure we speak a lot and we talk a lot. I want to make sure that people who are watching us or even school leaders, I'm a new school leader. I have QSR coming up. What does that mean? How does it show up? How will it be used for or against me or whatever? So I want to make sure we understand. On your life cycle portion of the QSR, you talked about one of the things you said, I think it was like the second to third bubble. It talked about resources and it's something about moving the leaders from thinking to acting. Can you share more about what that means? So I know you get the report, and I do want to push a little bit on Vice Chairman Salmon's question, specifically around the feedback on the assignments. Are we actually providing, this is why it's a quality, proficient, et cetera, that level of feedback on assignments? So that's the first question.
Yeah. So, thank you for bringing that question back, because I know he asked about that and we didn't get back to it. There were some questions packed in there, but yes. So it is in the report. And that's also another thing that we open up the debrief to as well. If they have questions about a specific assignment, why did it land here? We open that up to them. I've had other school leaders reach back out later, and we have a call and walk back through it. So I always want to make sure that we not just communicate that to them up front, but we also make ourselves available if there's a question that comes up later. How did we land here? And even so far as like, what would this look like if we were to use, this moving forward? So definitely want to make sure when we're in the debrief and that the report both provides similar levels of support to understand why is it here or why is it there for the assignment review.
Okay. And then one more follow-up on the assignment review. How much do we take into consideration, if at all, when giving that feedback, knowing that a lot of schools, particularly post-Common Core, adopted a curriculum, right? And a lot of time the curriculum come with a certain level of lesson plans. Do we want all of our teachers to mark it up and do things and make it unique? Yes, but we also know that a lot of times schools may adopt the curriculum and the lesson plans. How do we account for that, if at all, when giving feedback, or don't we? And that's part of the discussion.
Yeah, that's also a great question. I mean, I treat each assignment as its own independent thing, right? I'm not going to measure it based on the text that it came from, but the quality that it stands by itself. And that's the way I think about it. Back to your question about sort of like responsiveness, I would always advocate that the assignment's been adapted for your students. That's the main part of teaching, that students are receiving things where they are, and then they're built up to get to where the standard is. So that means that any assignment should be adapted, in my opinion. I will say that anecdotally, that one trend we have seen over time, and this has also been true from TNTP as well, that they've told us more globally speaking, that assignments from curricular resource documents do rate more strongly than an assignment that was developed independently by a teacher alone, right, with no other supports. So I think that speaks to the level of work that does go into a curricular resource, and the thinking behind that goes before you adopt something, right? You don't want to just adopt something without understanding, has the planning been done for that to be set up to be aligned.
Right. And I think I bring this up because I think that also aligns a bit with the point made by Board Member Rodriguez, right? Like, we also give schools a huge amount of autonomy. We give them all the autonomy for choosing their curriculum and what that looks like. And if they have, while I understand the best practice around teaching, and those are things that we want to do, we are the authorizer. We don't go in and tell them how to develop their teachers. So I'm just also wondering about how we deal with that nuance of, yes, but this is, I understand you all are grading this, but this is the curriculum that we chose, this is the resource, et cetera, and how you have those conversations. So now back to the life cycle piece, where it was, you said there was the phase of moving the leaders from thinking to acting, and you talked about we provide resources to help them do that, or at least you voiced over that portion. Can you talk more? Yep. Exactly. Given what you shared about that, really post QSR, we're not going back in to see how you've responded. We're not, kind of micromanaging your every action step. What does that look like in terms of us as an authorizer equipping leaders with resources to move? Like, what does that even mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I think the most concrete example I have is the data mining that I've done. So for example, I already know which component of the framework typically is the most challenging for schools. So I want to make sure prior to having QSRs this year that I have some resources in my back pocket to offer them in that area if that is a weak point for them. And so that's what I mean is beyond the sort of overview of the domain 3 and domain 2 classroom environment instruction, I want to be able to do it like a component level, for example, like student discourse, offer them that perspective. And then if that is the low area, I want to be able to offer them resources in student discourse so they have some ways to go. And then they have the choice to choose whichever resource it might be. But I want to be able to offer that to them instead of just saying, this is the area which is lowest for your school. I want to be able to back that up with you could go here or here or here to get some supports in that area to improve student talk in your school.
Okay, so I just want to thank you for answering that. I just want to say I think that the QSR is a valuable tool for schools in the sense of that it does exactly that. It gives you a snapshot in time of what's happening from a quality standpoint. I do want us to continue to be mindful about how we use QSRs and how they play into either our accountability or even around conditions, et cetera, for movement because of some of the discrepancies and things that we've talked about in terms of that really fine line. But I do encourage LEA leaders who are listening or even the public to look at this tool because it is giving a snapshot from a very well, people probably don't say we're independent or neutral, but from a outside perspective into what's happening at the school at a given point in time based off a very proven framework. But the nuance of if I don't adopt Danielson, am I then trying to, change something to match this? So I want us to, I value the tool and I think it's a good tool. And I want us to be mindful of how we continue to use it coupled with Aspire, which is coming as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Or not coming, Aspire is here. It is here. It's here.
It's arrived.
Thank you. Board Member Davis.
Yes, how you doing, Travis? So on slide 26, it says 45 QSRs across 18 LEAs. So that's about 2 to 3 visits per school. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a skewed number. So KIPP DC is about 20 of those.
So it's okay. So we're doing
Yeah.
one per school, but one LEA could be massive. So you're going to
Yes.
schools.
Yeah,
Got
it totally depends on how many campuses or schools each LE has. So, for example, KIPP again has 20 schools. They have 6-ish campuses, whereas like a Shining Stars is a single campus LEA, they would just have one QSR.
Sure. Okay, and so the two domains that were referenced were classroom environment and instruction. So I would imagine that instruct domain 3 focuses on the instructional core, and then classroom environment, we're talking about, relationships, classroom culture, so forth and so on. Okay, and then and so this tool is just, for a school that may be struggling with a particular area, or like, student talk or particular standards. This is just as as was discussed earlier, this is just an extra set of eyes to give you feedback to help you improve your practice in hopes that you will begin to make improvements.
Yes, sorry, I was struggling to follow the question, but I think you're saying that those two main domains provide us like the lens to give them feedback around environment and instruction.
Yes. And so I'm wondering, are there schools that have just outperformed when you look at the frame when you look at the QSR, and are there ways to help schools that have done a pretty decent job help schools that may have some struggles? Like how do we cultivate collaboration? How does that work?
That's a great question. It reminds me of like, the teacher buddy system, where you have, or even a school leader cluster where you have other people you can get feedback from. I think that's actually that could be an additional resource that we could think about how we would include that in our resources for schools that would like to grow in a certain area. So that's a great point. I just wanted to go back to this slide to address what I think you were saying, which is where do folks fall? And so the 3 examples here were the top performers that year, 22, 23, in terms of the instruction domain. On the other side of that, this slide, this was this past year, those were the lowest performing schools in terms of the instruction domain. Does that kind of go back to your question?
Yes. Yeah. And so my point is to say, if we have LEAs that are, performing extremely well, and we do have some schools that are underperforming in particular areas, right? Like based on you go in with the QSR and you say, hey, you know what, this school, if they could pull this lever, they would see tremendous gains. Why don't we connect them with this school who does this extremely well, right? So then, I think you know, that is a way to be even more neutral and provide supports, like, so schools can help one another, or, set up, some type of meeting between the two instructional teams, right? To talk about this. Hey, we've noticed this. We noticed that this school is doing this well. We noticed that, you all, are working towards this area. Why don't we put you two together to, develop this particular area, I think that's just, low-hanging fruit, if you will.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. I definitely have a note about that. I think there's a lot of power in what you said, connecting schools. At least from my perspective, come from DC public schools, when you have a central office versus when you are an LEA as a charter school, the resources you have access to look very different. You are your own agency, right? So I like that access to resources or knowledge, if you will, that like can get them over the hump, create a mentee-mentor relationship between school leaders. There's a lot of possibilities that could be there that we could be the go-between. We wouldn't have to direct them to do that, but like it doesn't hurt to say like this school might be a great resource for questioning or discussion, or this school might be a great resource for how they assess students real time. Yeah, I really appreciate that thought. That's got the wheels spinning.
Okay, thank you, Travis, for your presentation and for facilitating this important discussion on an issue that impacts so much of our work. We will move on, board members, to the next item on our agenda, which is a hearing on an additional facility request. And for that, I will yield the floor to Bijan Lane, Sector Planning and Compliance Specialist, to introduce the proposal from the Next Step Public Charter School. And I would also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks. I'll have each member from the school community introduce themselves at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Hello, my name is Bijan Lane. I am a specialist in the school performance department. Tonight, the board will hear from the Next Step Public Charter School regarding its request to relocate a second facility from 1420 Columbia Street Northwest to 3333 14th Street Northwest ahead of school year 2025-26. The school will continue operating its main facility at 3047 15th Street Northwest. The proposed facility, located at 3333 14th Street Northwest, is 0.6 miles from the main facility. To date, DC PCSB has not received any public comment regarding this proposal. Representatives from the school are here to answer your questions.
Good evening. I am just trying to find my presentation and I will get started.
Welcome and take your time.
All right, are you able to see that?
No, not yet.
Not yet?
Do we need to, Aisha, do we need to give sharing abilities?
Okay, let me go back. Maybe I need to click something on my end. There we go. We good now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So good evening, charter board members, board president, executive director, Dr. Walker Davis, and community members. My name is Doctora Vivian Robledo, she, her, ella, and I am the executive director of the Next Step El Próximo Paso Public Charter School. And I am here with Chief Operating Officer Monique Mitchell, I believe Sarah Brown from EdOps should be on. Susan Kay of Cressa and Jake Sinti of Open Impact Group, who have been supporting our real estate search. Andrew Vincent, Chief Investment Officer from Horning. And I believe there are some board members and staff members here just for support, but the first ones that I've named will be available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for having us on this evening and allowing us the opportunity to share our reason for our charter facilities amendment. So the next step is, as you know, an adult charter school in Columbia Heights serving DC residents 16 to 30. We were chartered in 1996 and opened our doors in 1998. We are located at 3047 15th Street with the auxiliary campus on Columbia Road. We provide students with a choice of a day or an evening program in GED, English and Spanish, and ESL classes to improve their English language skills. We also provide wraparound services such as case management, childcare, so that we help students remove any barriers to their academic attainment. And we also provide access to post-secondary coursework and workforce skills development. Our mission, as stated on the slide, really speaks to removing barriers that currently impede student success. And we provide a unique and supportive educational experience. And our approach is holistic through a culturally responsive and equitable lens. And we truly believe we are the hidden gem of Columbia Heights. So how did TNS get started? Well, it began as a really small program for parenting families at the Latin American Youth Center in a small apartment right above Heller's Bakery in Mount Pleasant. When that changed from a smaller program, LAYC applied for and was granted a charter school status, and they moved to the second floor of that LAYC building on Columbia Road. Growth of the school continued, and they leased the 3047 15th Street building, and that space provided a floor to LAYC Career Academy and TNS. And they shared that space for 5 years. At the start of school year 17-18, TNS ended up taking over the whole building. The school was growing. And then in spring 2020, TNS came before PCSB to request a facilities amendment for the current auxiliary space on Columbia Road, which you approved. But COVID paused us moving into that location, and we weren't able to use it until everyone came back from the pandemic and resumed in-person classes. We quickly used up that space. So now from that 2020 to today, over these last 4 years, the impact to the pandemic had on enrollment was pretty big at the start, but TNS was able to bounce back, and we've had significant growth, especially in the last 2 years. Last year, we exceeded our enrollment ceiling, and this year we have exceeded our applications compared to last year, and we're on track to hit our projected numbers for this year. And of course, when you have higher enrollment, and we've stayed in between that 500 enrollment ceiling, except last year where we did go over for a few students, it also means that other areas have to increase, right? So we have to hire more staff. We had more trainings needed. We needed more space. We need more equipment, technology, and supplies in order to meet the needs of our student population. In July of 2023, we completed a strategic planning process, which now has given us 4 North Star goals, 5 strategies, and this led us to evaluate our current space overall in both buildings. And we realized that we do need a more versatile space in the auxiliary area. Our strategic plan centers staff and student experience around collaboration and partnerships, not only with each other, but also with the greater DC community, increasing our relationships with community organizations, allowing for more post-secondary and workforce exposure, and support to our alumni who are transitioning beyond the GED into the DC community and becoming stronger contributors to the economy. This has led us to searching, and we found Tivoli to be the closest facility to our current main campus. And I will now let Monique take the lead.
Hello, this is Monique Mitchell, Chief Operating Officer for the Next Step. Yes, we have found Tivoli, which is located at 3333 14th Street Northwest near the Gala Hispanic Theater. This space will be an extension of our main campus that is just located about a block away. And it replaces our current auxiliary location that's at 1420 Columbia Road, which is about 2 or 3 blocks away from Tivoli. Our anticipated move-in date is July 2025, and the term of our lease is a 7 to 10 year period. We would be occupying the 2nd and 3rd floors, which is the former PCSB space, plus some additional space on the 3rd floor. What we would occupy is about 14,955 square feet, with an anticipated certificate of occupancy at 214. We plan for our hours of operation to be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And this new facility, as Dr. Vivian mentioned, means that this is more space and more opportunities for us. In this new space, we will have 4 large classrooms. We'll have a multi-purpose room for meetings, seminars, workshops, and workforce training. We'll have offices and conference rooms to suit current and increased staffing needs. We'll have a student working area for them to collaborate and complete assignments. And again, we're located near our main campus, as well as public transportation, which is convenient for our students whose main mode of going to and from school is using public transportation. Also, we think that this area will be effective when it comes to recruitment, with it being located near public transportation, as well as the various businesses that are in the area. And speaking of the businesses, this also could offer opportunities for our students job opportunities for our students to possibly work at some of the surrounding businesses. And just wanted to give you all a brief idea of who our students are. Our students have made the decision to return to school to get their GED, to complete school and get their GED and or learn English as a second language. And so they're living up to their commitment to learning every time that they walk through our doors. Most of our students are adult students who have obligations to their family, work, and other commitments before and after school. We have very low incidence of disruptive behavior amongst our students. Again, our students use public transportation to go back and forth to school. And they also are patrons of the businesses that are in the area. Also, they show gratitude and appreciation for the various wraparound services that the school provides them, as well as our teaching community as a whole. So we receive great feedback from our students around the education that they're getting at the school, as well as the wraparound services that have been helpful to to them.
Thank you, Monique. So we shared a lot of supporting documentation for you. And at this time, if you have questions that we can answer, or the realtor or the or Andrew from Horning, we'd be glad to answer questions at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Robledo and Ms. Mitchell, for this presentation this evening. I think we have a few board members with questions. We'll begin with board member Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. I had several questions that I actually asked of staff before tonight, so I just want to go on record and say that I did get those answers and they were satisfactory. A few of them, however, I want to raise tonight. I want to start with your the leasehold improvements. I read, I think, what seemed to be conflicting information, but staff tried to clear it up. Are you going to fund your leasehold improvements from cash, or are you going to finance them, and talk a little bit about what those improvements will look like?
Monique?
Yes, so we plan to finance our leasehold improvements with cash. We do not plan on taking out any loans or anything to do so. And the leasehold improvements that we were referring to would be repainting the building, possibly recarpeting, or some new type of flooring down in the building. And also in part of the space, there is going to be they're going to make it a classroom. And at this time, we're thinking about keeping the ceiling off of the classroom because of the natural light that is overhead. However, if we decide that we do want to put a ceiling on the classroom, that would be one of the improvements that we would do.
Okay. And you all, again, one of the questions I asked of staff was for current financial information, and I was satisfied you all have a pretty healthy days of cash on hand. So I was pleased to see that. Obviously, you have the cash to be able to fund your leasehold improvements from cash, but you're comfortable doing that and understanding sort of what your cash position would be after you finish. Will you do the leasehold improvements over a period of time? Because it doesn't sound like you have much to do. Is it maybe a 45-day project, 60-day project? What are you thinking?
Yes, I agree that it is not much to do. What we're thinking is that we probably would want that done before we were to move in July. And we are talking with the landlord now around what do we want to do now versus what we will wait for. So I'm just thinking, like, in terms of the painting, possibly that could be done towards the end, maybe possibly like April, May, June, somewhere around there. The ceiling on the classroom, I think we would see once the classroom is built out. So then we'll determine whether or not we want to seal it off or not. So I think that's some of the things. And then in terms of carpeting and such, I think that could be done closer to when they actually start the work. Actually, when they start the work on building out the classrooms. So just in thinking about this, I think that the jobs could be spread out, but the thought is that some of this would take place by the end of June.
June 2025.
June 2025.
Okay. And is your occupancy expense comparable for the new space versus the old auxiliary space, or is it significantly higher? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so the certificate of occupancy, that's at 217, is higher than what it is at our current auxiliary space. Currently, our C of O is 100, and so we're increasing that by 117 for
Okay,
the space.
thank you for that. And I'm sorry. So when I say occupancy
Okay.
expense, yeah,
Mhm.
so the cost of your lease, essentially, yeah. So you're leaving auxiliary space and you're essentially trading in for new space. Is the new space significantly higher than the existing auxiliary space?
Yes, so this space is about 14,000, closer to 15,000 square feet versus our current location, which is about 8,000 square feet. So yes, the square footage is definitely higher with our new space.
Okay, talk to me about the cost. So your rent right now, and you can give me per square foot. I'm just trying to understand if it's a significantly higher occupancy expense, given that you'll have to obviously accommodate for that as well as funding your leasehold improvements out of pocket. I just want to get a sense that you all sort of understand that it's a higher occupancy expense and that we're comfortable with that. That's where I'm going with the questioning, if that helps.
Yes, that does help. And Sarah, if you are on, would you be able to jump in?
And you don't have to tell me exactly what the lease is. If you just give me price per square foot, I can back into it.
Yes. Let's see. Is she on or no? She's not. Okay. I will look for oh, you know what? Actually, I think is Susan.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in and just give
Sure.
rough order of magnitude if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Hi everybody. I'm Jake Sinti from Open, one of TNS's real estate advisors. And so in terms of the price per square foot, the price per square foot effectively in this space is significantly lower. I think right now at Centronia, the current auxiliary space, our price per square foot is in the mid 30s. And due to our real estate tax reimbursement, this space is effectively going to be in the high 20s per square foot. It's larger, so the aggregate cost is a little bit higher, but essentially we're doubling the size of our auxiliary footprint for only about a 15 or so % increase in our aggregate occupancy costs.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. And in terms of the lease, I on the slide deck it said, or I don't know if you had a number. You said it's a 7-year lease. I thought I had heard 10-year lease. What is the actual term of the lease?
Hi, this is Susan. I'm on the real estate team with Jake. So we are signing a 10-year lease with the option to terminate the lease if we find more suitable space, if we're growing and we want to consolidate everybody at the end of 7 years.
Okay. And the private landlord allowed for that flexibility to your satisfaction?
That's correct. That's correct. There'll be a cost associated, but it will be kind of unamortized deal costs, which is very typical in the market.
I would agree with that. Great. Okay. And then my only other question, and we kind of got at it earlier, is you're increasing your total occupancy, or your essentially, I'll use the word capacity. You're increasing your capacity with the thought or the plan that enrollment will follow, or is your current enrollment sufficient to sustain your new occupancy costs given where you'll be changing from? So it's really two questions. So you'll have slightly more space, but you'll have an increased occupancy cost. And so does your enrollment, is it adequate to cover that cost now? Or do you have to increase enrollment to be comfortable in terms of the new occupancy expense?
No, so our current enrollment ceiling of 500, which we have been going over for the past few years, is sufficient to cover the rent for this new facility. So where we are currently, we need this space, but also in terms of being able to sustain the new Tivoli rent at the current at our current enrollment, then yes, we're able to do that. We do not need to increase our ceiling to do it.
Enrollment to get there. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. Okay. I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Stanley Beatty. Board Member Shakur Adamafani, I think you had some questions.
Yep, thank you. And thank you to the Next Step team. Very exciting moment for the school. Just one question. I believe Board Member Stanley Beatty asked some of the questions I was going to ask around being able to cover the cost, but really curious, how do you plan to carry forward and strengthen the connection between the main facility and the proposed auxiliary space? I'm very familiar with that community, and it's a little ways away between. So just wondering, how do you plan to foster a connection and make it one school in two places, I guess, if you will?
So that's a really good question, because it often comes up when even when they talked about the current auxiliary space at 1420 Columbia Road. We now have students come back to the main campus for a lot of the programming, for lunch. We built time in there for them to travel. So we make sure that they're completely connected to the main campus now. What this allows us to do is actually connect main campus to the new auxiliary that we didn't have, with being able to have seminar, workforce, conference space, and doing that. So we're now going to be able to do the reverse.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Robledo and team. This is exciting. Oh, excuse me. I think we have one more question. Come back. Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. I just had one other question. I think your real estate consultant mentioned like tax relief that essentially allow for a slightly lower dollar per square foot. Is he? I can't find my squares here. Is he on?
I'm still here. Yeah.
Okay, great. Is that a tax abatement, or what did you call it?
It's a tax reimbursement that charter schools can receive as of right, and part of why it's advantageous is because the building that we're in now, the current auxiliary building, has lower real estate taxes than Tivoli, and so there's a kind of I guess call it an incentive, a competitive advantage that we have. We're able to be in buildings with higher real estate taxes, and there's and our as of right exemption makes it viable to do that at a rent that is effectively well below market for this area in a building like this.
Interesting. Does it burn off at all?
No, it's a full reimbursement of our real estate taxes.
Of the real estate taxes. Interesting. Okay. And then just one other question. Is your rent abated until you complete the leasehold improvements, or are you paying your full load even during the improvements?
It's abated. The rent doesn't commence until the space is delivered to TNS. And then one thing I'll add, just as a for the avoidance of doubt, is that the bulk of the leasehold improvements are being performed by the landlord, Horning Brothers, and the owner of the building, in terms of actually constructing the classrooms, the work that requires filing, and the cost of that work is amortized into the rent. And so we're paying for it over time. And then there's smaller cosmetic upgrades that we will make, that Monique was mentioning, that can happen closer to when we actually move in. But all the while, we're not paying rent until we actually take the space and occupy.
Good deal. Thank you.
No problem.
The Next Step team will look forward, I believe, to see you back here again next month then.
Thank you very much for the time, and thank you for everyone who is on to support us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, board, we have Christy Dennis, Manager of Sector Planning and Compliance, who will introduce the proposal for revisions to the accreditation policy. I'd also like to invite representatives from DCI and the New England Association of Schools and Colleges to provide remarks. Mike Roskam and George Edwards.
Good evening. My name is Christy Dennis. I am a manager in the School Performance Department. This is a public hearing to discuss proposed revisions to DCPCSB's accreditation policy. The first proposed change is updating the name of Advance Ed, a DCPCSB approved accrediting body, to Cognia. Advance Ed became Cognia in 2019, and the organization requests that its name be updated in DCPCSB's policy. The second proposed revision is adding the New England Association of Schools and Colleges to the list of approved accrediting agencies. The New England Association of Schools and Colleges meets the policy's criteria for inclusion on DCPCSB's list of accrediting organizations. DCPCSB opened the policy for public comment on August 19th, and the public comment window closes tonight. DCPCSB did not receive any public comments. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for this, Christy. I'm going to kick it off with a question. I would love if we could take a step back and give us a little bit of a 101 on what is the role of accreditation in our work as an authorizer.
Yeah, absolutely. So to define, I guess, what accreditation is really just the act of granting credit or recognition, especially to an educational institution that maintains suitable standards. Accreditation is really just necessary to any person or institution in education that needs to prove that they meet general standards of quality. In this case, PCSB has 5 standards of quality. And those would be standards, self-study, on-site evaluation, monitoring, and reevaluation. As far as from a high-level standpoint, DCPCSB's accreditation policy states that every charter school must obtain accreditation from an accrediting body approved by DCPCSB by the end of its 9th year of operation. Additionally, a school must be at minimum in the candidacy phase with an approved accrediting agency by December 31st of its 7th year of operation. And essentially, failure to have or maintain accreditation for the entire school program, including the residential education program, is grounds for charter non-continuance or non-renewal at a school's 10-year review and all subsequent reviews and renewals, respectively.
Thank you for that, Christy. I have a quick follow-up question before our guests jump in, and forgive me for delaying it. Does that mean that every LEA must be accredited by one of our approved bodies? And the body of the range of approved accreditors reflect the diversity accordingly? They must reflect the diversity of different kind of school models and programs we have?
Yes. So each school does have to be or receive accreditation and ensure their accreditation is renewed by the end of their 9th year. To answer your second question, we do want to ensure that DCPCSB's accrediting bodies listed in our accreditation policy do reflect the diversity of the schools that we serve. Do reflect the diversity of the programs within the schools in the LEAs that exist within DC public charter schools, which is why the New England Association of Schools and Colleges in DCI is requesting to add them as an accrediting body because of their unique lens in collaboration with the IB program. So by adding them to the list of accrediting bodies, it would ensure that we would have a more diverse list of accrediting bodies within our accreditation policy.
Thank you.
It might be helpful if I introduced myself and said a few words about the New England Association of Schools and Colleges.
Yes, please. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. My name is George Edwards. I'm the Chief Accreditation Officer for the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. The New England Association of Schools and Colleges is a regional accreditor and an international accreditor. The bulk of our work is in the 6 New England states. However, we also accredit a number of other schools throughout the United States and about 450 schools in 90 different countries around the world. As Ms. Dennis explained, we have a unique program of accreditation that we've developed in collaboration with the International Baccalaureate. We're the only accrediting agency in the world that has such a unique program. This program allows schools like DC International to go through their required IB reevaluation, which is required by IB every 5 years, and simultaneously go through the accreditation process with the NEASC. And so the reason that we're here today is that Laura Lane, who is the World School Manager for DC International, introduced our program to Mr. Roskam and suggested that it might be a program that they would be interested in because of the fact that it really provides an integrated approach to both reevaluation and accreditation. This program has started internationally, and we have a number of schools internationally that have adopted this program, and we have just begun to provide the opportunity for domestic schools to adopt this program. Our first domestic adoption is in the final stages. It's a large school district in Middlebury, Vermont. And so DC International would be our second domestic school to go through this. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, either about the New England Association of Schools and Colleges or about our collaborative learning protocol.
And I think George did a nice job of summarizing kind of the interest here, but I'm happy to add on from the DC International perspective if that's helpful as well.
Yes, that'd be great.
Sure. You know, we, as an international baccalaureate world school, we go through this rigorous evaluation from the IBO. And from the CMO perspective, it looks remarkably like an accreditation process. And so then separately and distinctly, we've had to go through another accreditation process. Currently, we're accredited by Middle States Association of Colleges. And we think both of those things have been helpful, but they're also redundant. And they take a ton of time from our staff and interrupt instruction at times to make sure we're going through both of those processes effectively. And so we were very excited when Laura Lane introduced us to NEASC, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, George, because that would allow us to merge those two processes that have similar outcomes associated with them into one and be much less invasive on the school community. And so we're very excited about the potential here and the alignment on supporting us through the IB program, especially in kind of the DCI unique model of being IB for all.
Thank you for that. Treasurer Wright.
So Michael and George, you both just answered both of my questions because I was going to ask, well, we've had IB schools, where did they go before? But you use Middle State. So that answers that. So I guess my question is more to the staff. I understand why we might use or approve the New England, I don't want to try it, NASC, George, so I'm just going to say the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. But what would be the benefit to us to add that, Christy, to our list, and how does it align with the mission? How does this mission align with our current criteria for adding accrediting bodies?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So as far as like the benefits of adding a new accrediting body, or more so adding the New England Association of Schools and Colleges to the list of our current accrediting bodies. So something that I believe George and Michael already shared is that NEASC can really serve DC public charter schools by providing them with a unique option for and aligned to IB reevaluation and accreditation. There are currently, I believe, including DCI, 3 LEAs that implement the IB program within their schools. And so this would benefit schools outside of DCI. And then also I could foresee a future in which a school or LEA may implement IB within their school as well. And so this would be beneficial to them during the accreditation process too. As far as how their mission aligns to PCSB's current criteria for adding accrediting bodies. So the New England Association of Schools and Colleges mission is really to partner with schools to assess, to support and promote high quality education for all students through accreditation, professional assistance, in the pursuit of best practices. And also like per PCSB's current accreditation body policy, an accrediting body or agency must meet the 5 standards for approval. And in NEASC's application, they did a great job of outlining how they meet each 5 of those standards.
Okay, and not that I'll ask you to go through all 5 of the standards, but I just want to make clear that this is not about just one LEA coming and saying, this is the body I want to accreditate me. This is, we actually have standards that our bodies that we approve must meet. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. It's not just that DCI wants this, that NEA, see, that's why I shouldn't have tried it. New England Association of Schools and Colleges actually met our clear 5 standards, and therefore you're proposing that they join the list and not just because one LEA is desiring that.
Yes, that's correct. It could benefit additional LEAs outside of the District of Columbia International School. And per their application, they indicated how their process very much aligns to our 5 standards.
Good, good. And George, thank you for bringing it domestic. I know we have a lot of schools that are looking at IB, some that actually implement it. So continue to spread your wings domestically for our schools here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm a very big proponent of IB. I started the first IB school north of in northern New England about 10 years ago. So it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. I've been on a number of IB visits as an accreditor, and I really look forward to hopefully having the opportunity to work with DC International.
Thank you. Christy, we appreciate your work on this. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Thank you, Mr. Roskamp, for joining us. I think we'll see you again briefly next month.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Board members, we move on to the public meeting portion of tonight's meeting, and I invite a motion now to approve this evening's agenda.
I move to approve the September 16th, 2024 board meeting agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We don't have to do this, but Secretary Adam Afanian, would you please take a roll call vote?
Absolutely. Chair Cruzy. Vice Chairman Sandman.
Aye.
Treasurer Wright.
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez.
Aye.
Board Member Davis.
Aye.
And I am an aye.
Thank you, the ayes have it. I will now invite Gina Lucchese and yield the floor to her. She is our Senior Specialist of School Quality and Evaluation to introduce the proposal and recommendation regarding the 10-year charter review of Academy of Hope Public Charter School. And I would also like to invite representatives from Academy of Hope to provide remarks.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Good evening. My name is Gina Lucchese. I'm a senior specialist in the school performance department. And tonight the board will vote on the charter review and continuance of Academy of Hope Adult Public Charter School. The following charter review standard applies to each school. The School Reform Act stipulates that DC PCSB shall review a school's charter at least once every 5 years. As part of this review, DC PCSB must determine whether the school committed a violation of applicable law or a material violation of the conditions, terms, standards, or procedures set forth in its charter, including violations relating to the education of children with disabilities, and whether the school failed to meet the goals and student academic achievement expectations set forth in its charter. If DCPCSB determines that a school has committed a violation of applicable law or a material violation of the terms of its charter, or has not met its goals, the board may, at its discretion, revoke the school's charter or grant the school a conditional continuance. Additionally, there's a fiscal component to the charter review. Per the School Reform Act, the board is required to revoke a school's charter if it determines that the school has engaged in a pattern of non-adherence to generally accepted accounting principles, has engaged in a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, or is no longer economically viable. Academy of Hope Adult Public Charter School is up for its 10-year review. The school educates 840 adult students at 2 facilities located in wards 5 and 8. Academy of Hope Adult Public Charter School adopted the Performance Management Framework, or PMF, as its charter goals. In doing so, the school committed to earning an average PMF score of at least 45% throughout the review period. Given the disruption in schooling and data collection during the COVID-19 pandemic and DCPCSB's performance management framework revision efforts, DCPCSB staff did not assess goal attainment for school years 2019-20, 2020-21, or 2021-22. Consequently, for this review period, we assessed Academy of Hope Adult Public Charter Schools goals performance using 2018-19 PMF outcomes and 2022-23 goal attainment pathway performance as outlined in DCPCSB's charter goals policy. Academy of Hope Adult Public Charter School met its charter goals, earning 57.7% on the PMF in school year 2018-19 and exceeding the sector average in all 4 transitional goals measures in 2022-23. DCPCSB staff determined that the school has not committed a violation of law or a material violation of its charter, has adhered to generally accepted accounting principles, has not engaged in a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, and is economically viable. Based on these findings, DCPCSB staff recommends that the board vote to continue Academy of Hope Adult Public Charter Schools charter. School representatives are available to speak about the school's performance over the past 5 years and to answer the board's questions.
Good evening. I am Dr. Patrina Clark, the current chair of the board for the Academy of Hope Adult Public Charter School. It's truly an honor to speak with you this evening as we reflect on Academy of Hope's extraordinary journey over the past decade. Thank you so much for having me. Having had the privilege of serving as board chair during the school's formative years and rejoining the board in 2022, I've witnessed the resilience, innovation, passion, and unwavering commitment that define this institution. These qualities have sustained us through unprecedented challenges, including a fire that struck our Ward 8 campus and the global pandemic. Despite these challenges, Academy of Hope has not only survived, but thrived. Our adult learners have demonstrated remarkable resolve, evidenced by record-breaking enrollment, a solid financial footing, and consistently impressive academic and workforce outcomes. These achievements highlight the strength and determination of our students and their ability to rise above adversity. One of the most standout moments for me this year was attending our graduation ceremony, where we celebrated our largest ever graduating class with 147 graduates. The joy and pride in the eyes of our graduates and their families reaffirmed why we do this work: to empower adult learners, their families, and their communities as they strive toward their highest aspirations. As a board, my colleagues and I are more committed than ever to ensuring that Academy of Hope continues to flourish. We are especially proud of all that the leadership team, educators, and staff have accomplished as reflected in this review. Together, we will continue to transform lives and build stronger communities, one learner at a time. I'd like to now yield the floor to our Chief Executive Officer, Lysester Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Lysester Johnson. I'm the CEO of Academy of Hope, and I am joined by my colleagues, Tiffany Godbout, our Chief Operating Officer, and Dr. Michael Durant, our Chief Academic Officer. I have a couple of slides to share with you. They're brief. Let me find them. Sorry. I have way too many open here. I will open here. And oops. Slideshow. And are you able to, am I sharing?
Not yet.
Okay.
Are we able to give Ms. Johnson the ability to share?
She has the ability to share.
Thanks. User error here. Let's see. All right, let me try again. Okay, I think we are here. And oops.
Yep, we can see it.
Oh, great. All right, so I'll jump ahead here. Just a little bit about our mission. Just to remind folks, we're Academy of Hope. We support adult learners in changing their lives and transforming their communities by providing high quality adult education and career training that we believe creates pathways to economic mobility. And how do we do that? We offer two pathways to a high school credential through the GED and the National External Diploma Program. We have a career academy focused on healthcare and IT. College transition, this is a little known program that we really work with our learners to earn college credit. We have articulation agreements. Our learners participate in dual enrollment while with us and working on their high school credentials. Adults can earn up to 16 college credits. In fact, that's the floor for learners enrolled with us. And of course, we couldn't do this work without the wraparound supportive services. Over the last 5 years, some key highlights. We transitioned to a hybrid instructional model, launched a number of additional workforce programs. Workforce learners now account for about 25% of our student enrollment. Our enrollment has increased by 80%. In 2019, we're at 461 learners, and our ending the year in FY24, 834. And this year we are on course to exceed our enrollment ceiling. Graduates exceeded our pre-pandemic level. Last year, 147 graduates, including our workforce graduates, but 55 academic learners, which is a record for us since being a charter. We launched a graduate transition program, Hope Forward, where over 70% of our graduates have become employed. It's a year-long program supporting those learners with job placement, life skills, having a life coach, and developing a long-term career plan, and received some seed funding to do that. We're currently working with the College Board to add a test for credit option for our learners. So in addition to the 16 credit hours that they get with us through dual enrollment and articulation agreements, our goal is to eliminate the first year of college by working with our learners to test and earn college. And we're in the strongest financial position we've been in. We closed this fiscal year with a 16% margin and 152 days of cash on hand. That being said, we know there are areas for continued development. As highlighted in the report, we are working with our teachers with online instruction. In fact, we hired a director of curriculum and instruction doing regular teacher training with our learners with this new model and making sure that our teachers are up to speed. We've always had an emphasis in working with our learners with learning differences. We reinstated our adult learning specialist position. We'll be hiring a director of adult learning this year to better support our learners with learning differences and regular training and universal design for learning. Beginning literacy. About a third of our learners are individuals who are reading at beginning or doing numeracy skills at the beginning literacy levels. And we've added new programming for those learners and continue to support our lowest level learners. Significant changes in practice with our student support in terms of attendance. While I'm sure you've read with our attendance below sector, we are examining our policy. We know that it's working in persistence. And so we're looking at our policy for consistency across the sector and how we're best supporting our learners. More work hiring tech fluency instructors. Digital literacy is a critical part of our work at our new instructional model, and facilities. We are growing, and we've conducted a 5-year financial modeling and feasibility work to assess our facilities needs going forward. We will need additional space. Those are my high-level comments. I'm happy to share, answer any questions that you have. In the next 5 years, our goal is to double the number of residents we serve and to achieve a 2-fold increase in our graduation and employment rates. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Academy of Hope community, for this presentation and for joining us this evening. Congratulations on getting this to this place. I think we have some board members with questions, and we'll begin with board member Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. I just have a couple of questions on your financials. If you could go back, there was a slide that you shared where you were talking about your financial performance, particularly in 2024. If you could go back to that for me. And first of all, I want to thank you for providing your 2024 days, your cash days on hand. Typically, the information that we get is a bit older than that. So thank you for providing that. 2 quick questions for you while you pull that up. Your fiscal year end is when? Because you noted 152 days as of your fiscal year end 2024. What's that date?
June 30th.
Okay, perfect. And then your 16% margin that you note, what is that margin of what? What actually is that?
That's our net I'm Chief Operating Officer. It's our net operating margin.
Okay. And then I had just one other question for you. I noted that you all have about $4 million worth of debt that you refinanced in 2021. And it sounds like you got better preferable terms, which is excellent. That is going to mature on you in 2029. I'm assuming that you all are prepared for that, are thinking about that. I know people hear 2029 and think it's 5 years away, but $4 million is a pretty big nut. You're thinking about that already.
Yes, we are. And absolutely. In fact, that's some of the work that we've done on the 5-year modeling. Our intent will be to refinance or pay it off if we're in a position to do that. But we are very focused on, very aware of that and staying on top of it.
Perfect. And your lender has been good to work with, and obviously there's a solid relationship there, given that you were able to refinance your loan. So that's always good to hear. And then I just had one other question. I also read that you had an ongoing renovation project that you were funding from operations. You weren't funding that from financing?
Correct.
Is that
correct?
Okay.
Yes.
Can you talk about how that's going? Yeah, I think you're almost done, right?
We are. I'm happy. Tiffany, do you want to talk? I'm happy to go through it, or you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, we have a $1.8 million renovation of our Ward 8. It was leasehold improvements of our Ward 8 campus. And we had 1.8 in committed alterations. We've completed 1.7 million of those, and we anticipate completing the last portion actually this fiscal year by June of 2025.
Perfect. And is that you don't own the building, you lease the building, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. And is the $4 million, is that the extent of your debt, particularly at that level, or do you have like a line of credit? Do you have any other debt?
Don't have any debt at this time. We've had a line of credit in the past. Actually, we do. We have one that is a revolving line of credit we don't use. So that's why it's not top of mind with our current lender. So we have a mortgage. The 4 million you're referring to is our mortgage for our Ward 5 campus. And then our leasehold improvements were funded through a combination of the abatements and fundraising. And that's what we'll be finishing up this year. There's plenty of other renovations to be done on both campuses, like many schools, but those are the major ones, the major projects that we have taken on are to be completed this year.
And then the projects that you just alluded to that you may take on in the future, is the idea that you will fund those from cash flow, or at some point will you secure additional debt, or have you gotten that far yet?
Ms. Esther, you want to take that?
Sure, yeah. So we're doing modeling now. We're really looking at where we are. We've had quite, the last 2 years have been really strong financial years for us. We're building a reserve. We've also implemented a new investment policy to, really have our money make more money for us. So I think, ideally, and we also have a really strong fundraising team. Ideally, we would love to have the resources to be able to fund that from existing funds, but we are not opposed to looking at either tax credits or other deals that will give us the best option.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And then just one other question, Tiffany, you mentioned an abatement when you were talking about funding of the leasehold improvements. Can you help me understand?
Sure. We, as part of our agreement with because it's a lease and not a purchase, we have an actual rent abatement that was over a 10-year period. It was a portion of the rent that was abated each year. That expires in 2027, while our lease is through 2034. So we've got some time on our lease, but that helped us pay for the renovations that we had.
And that abatement is a direct offset to your rent.
Yes.
Good for you. Good for you. Thank you.
Board Member Stanley Beatty, Secretary Adam Fanyan, please.
Thank you. And thank you, Academy of Hope team, and congratulations for this, where you are. One question, particularly around your virtual course offerings. I know that you all have continued to maintain virtual offerings since the pandemic. And so I'm just curious, what variation do you observe in student outcomes and their experience in general between the in-person and virtual program?
Sure. Oh. Grant, are you?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me? Okay, wonderful. Well, I think that one of the challenges that we have is making sure that we continue to be accessible to all learners. And I think that the online platform allowed for us to be able to provide an opportunity to our learners that wanted to do distance education. I think that one of the most beneficial factors of that is allowing learners to be able to really continue the life that they have while still being able to focus and have those competing priorities and be able to still continue down the road that they wanted to continue down. We have seen that it's been extremely beneficial to them. We have continued to, monitor our academic instruction. So one of the things that we focus a lot on is making sure that our academic in-person learning is equivalent to our online instruction. And so that is coupled with a lot of professional development around online instructional practices and strategies, as well as making sure that a lot of our, principal and assistant principal informed evaluations are done online, so we can monitor some of the online instruction that's happening and making sure that the fidelity of our online instruction is up to tier with our face-to-face. And the learners and the outcomes, they have truly been rewarded by us giving them the opportunity to be able to have, different levels of learning modalities that could support them, even though normally a lot of times they will be cast away or not having that level of instruction because of life situations in the district. And so I think that it has really given them the chance to continue their education while still competing with all the other priorities that they have in their life.
Yeah, and I can go back, just give you a little bit of context. We were piloting a distance learning model prior to the pandemic. And that was the result of learners saying that it was very difficult for them to get to us 5 days a week. We are running an in-person program, 9 to 2, 5 days a week, for learners. And so we started a pilot using Google Classroom. And honestly, during the pandemic, that is what we scaled up. Of course, we've since gone to something less cumbersome, but it was a desire of our learners, and we heard that directly from our adult learners, that they needed more flexibility. And one of the conditions for maintaining this virtual instruction as a team was, are we going to see similar academic outcomes or better? And what we're seeing is we're doing better. Even with growing in sizes, the number of learners that we're serving, our outcomes are consistent or better than where we were during pre-pandemic.
Thank you very much. My next question sort of is two-part, with the second part building off of this question and then going to the first. So you follow me here. So when you talk about sort of the performance of the virtual program, can you kind of talk to me a little bit about, I know workforce development is a really big part of what else you offer to your students. So one, I would like to hear how the workforce development program has evolved over the past 5 years. But if you could start actually with the second part of the question, which means what is the connection between the workforce development program and your online, or how do you bridge the connection between that? And then the first question, which was, how has it evolved over the 5 years?
So I'll start. I think that we basically try to leverage, meaning we want to be able to, I guess, build that connection between what our academic learners are learning, as well as how those skills can be transferable towards a credential in our workforce program. So a little context around the program that we have about 25%, 75%. We are extremely committed to making sure that we're still serving the most needed population in the district and those learners that are working and focused towards their high school credentials. But one of the things that we do know is that when they get done with their high school credentials, there's nothing next for them. So what is the next step? And so one of the things that we wanted to provide for them was giving them that next step opportunity, which is through our workforce program. So one of the things that we've done is that we provided an opportunity for learners to be able to go through our workforce program, some while they're currently still pursuing their high school credentials, or want learners that come to us that already have their high school credentials, but their scores are not at the industry level towards moving towards a high school level certification. We developed our Workforce Academy. And so our Workforce Academy is that intermediate level of instruction that gives learners the leverage to be able to move forward. Because one of the things we didn't want to do was turn our doors to anyone. And so it gave us an opportunity to really leverage everything from what we're learning inside of the classroom to what we know is needed for employment opportunities outside of the classroom, which is one of our 21st century skills models that we do utilize, as well as being able to make sure that our high level certification learners are going to be able to be successful. And I definitely say that because of our outcomes and our academic performance, and then our high-level achievement and our high-level certifications, we have been extremely cornering this market to make sure that our learners not only come to us for the classes, but they're actually graduating and obtaining their certification. So I've been mostly extremely excited around the way that those two programs leverage each other, because one of the things for our learners that we do notice is that even though they get their high school credentials, a lot of times they ask us what's next. And us being able to provide that next step for them, to be able to put them out there, to be able to be productive and citizens in the DC, to be able to provide opportunities for their economic development, has been a great reward as well.
Thank you. And this is my last question, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues. So I am student A who is, and this is just going to help make it more concrete for me. I'm student A who is a part of the virtual program. However, I am interested in accessing the workforce program. What does my student life look like, or what does my learning look like? I'm a virtual student, and then I want to access the workforce program.
So if you're a virtual student and you're coming through our program, you have access to all the same programming as our in-person learners. So one of the things is that we have a student support team, which is a team that works around the wraparound services. And so it's a team of a director, assistant director, and 4 student support specialists that work with our evening and our day program. So each program have a student support specialist as well as an employment outreach specialist. And so what happens is that service, those programs that we offer for our in-person learners, they then turn around and offer those same opportunities for our virtual learners. And so there's nothing that our in-person learners receive besides the face-to-face and the hand-holding of touching that our virtual learners do not receive. And so it's really trying to make sure in the best way possible that the same services that we provide for Fidelity, that we're giving it to our virtual learners. So you'll be granted the same opportunities. And so when something is afforded to our daytime and our in-person learners, virtual learners get the same notifications in real time and have the same opportunities to be able to grasp those opportunities as well.
So my virtual coach would be the one who helps connect me to resources.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay.
And you might show up for labs. You will show up for, particularly in healthcare, there are hands-on labs, so you'll start online, but then you will come in potentially 2 days a week on some of the labs.
Okay. Yep. That's what I was trying to tease out. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Chairman Clark, when you joined, when we started this section, you very kindly introduced yourself and everyone on the team, but would you mind doing that one more time? It's been such a nice conversation, but we may have, I think I've forgotten who's who here.
Sure. So I'm Katrina Clark. I am current chair of our board of directors. Leicester Johnson is our CEO. Dr. Michael Durant is our chief academic officer. And we had one other person on the call.
Tiffany Godbout.
Oh, Tiffany Godbout. How could I forget Tiffany? She's our chief operating officer.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think we have just a few more questions. Vice Chair Salmon.
Thank you for the outstanding report and what you're doing for adult learners in the district. I'm very impressed. I admire what you're doing. I have one question, and it's a friendly one. You've had a remarkable increase in enrollment between the school year prior to the pandemic and your enrollment in the last school year. To what do you attribute the magnitude of the increase you've experienced?
Well, there are a couple of things. One, what we know and what research tells us is in down economies that adult ed programs experience explosions in enrollment. So we're riding a wave on some of that. But also speaking to the amazing outreach and enrollment team, we were just before the pandemic, we received a large capacity building grant from the Clark Foundation. And part of that, sorry, my window's open, you might hear that. A large capacity building grant, and part of that was to build our recruitment and enrollment team. So we went from a team of 1 to now, I think we're at 6 people who are all over DC and connecting with residents who want to be involved in our services. So a bigger investment, and I think the investment is paid off.
Thank you. Keep up the great work.
Leah, if I could just ask a question.
Please go ahead.
So I had the opportunity to do your graduation this year. It was such an exciting time. And I definitely echo all of the sentiments that were said by my colleagues. The fact that you're here, 10 years is no easy feat. Ms. Johnson, I know what it's like to be a founder, and I remember when you started. So it's good to see you guys going. Mr. Durant's still there, all of the good faces. So when you think about your next 5 years, what do you want to be true when you sit here again? Like what's dream big? You know, I used to tell my staff to give us the Cadillac version, but that's a little outdated. So give us the Tesla version of what it is that I date myself when I say a high price Cadillac. But when you think about the Tesla version, what would you like to be true 5 years from now for Academy of Hope?
We want every adult learner who needs these services to have access to them. And what that looks like, for us, everything from a space that says you are valued, we value you, and we're going to make the investments and help you achieve the goals that you want to achieve. We've had a goal for years to have a graduating class of 100 on the academic programs, the GED. We work with learners from beginning literacy all the way up to learners who are working to skill up in our workforce programs. But our goal for those who don't, 80% of our learners still do not have a high school credential, that number goes from 55 to 100. And we've got, so the outcomes, like doubling the outcomes, getting much better at the work that we do, and helping DC residents to achieve the goals that they've set for themselves.
Okay. Well, I will probably be there to pass those 100 degrees out with you when you get there. So thank you and congratulations for this milestone. It's huge.
Thank you.
Your graduations are a very, very special event. Congratulations, team. So, colleagues, I will entertain a motion.
I move to continue the Charter of Academy of Hope, PCS.
I second.
Thank you. Secretary Adama-Fanian, would you please take a roll call?
Internet is not behaving. Here we go. Chairwoman Cruzy.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman.
Aye.
Treasurer Wright.
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Aye, and congratulations.
Board Member Rodriguez.
Aye, congratulations.
Board Member Davis.
Aye.
I am a resounding aye. Congratulations, team. Oh, wait, I don't call it. Sorry, Leah, you call it.
Same thing you said. Congratulations, team. The ayes have it.
Yes, congratulations, you all.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, board members. Next on our agenda are charter amendment requests. Tonight's first request is from Basis DC Public Charter School. Melody Sampson, Chief School Performance Officer, has had to step away. So in her place, I will yield the floor to Dr. Michelle Walker-Davis. And I would also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks. And when they begin, I'd like each person from the Basis community to introduce themselves and their title. Thank you.
And Chair Cruzy, I will gladly pass it back to Melody right now. She is back.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy and Dr. Walker Davis. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are asking you to vote on the expansion request from Basis DC Public Charter School. The school is specifically seeking an enrollment ceiling increase and approval to begin serving grades K through 4. Currently, the school is approved to enroll 711 students in grades 5 through 12. Basis DC Public Charter School proposes serving 993 students in grades K through 12 in school year 25-26, reaching capacity in school year 28-29 with 1,227 students in grades K through 12. In its amendment application, Basis DC submitted an alternative growth schedule, gradually adding elementary grades over 3 school years, though still reaching capacity with 1,227 students in school year 28-29. DC PCSB staff uses the enrollment ceiling increase policy, or ECI policy, when assessing a school's growth request. The DC PCSB expansion amendment application further describes the criteria staff will consider for requests to serve new grades. Basis DC Public Charter School meets the ECI policy's criteria for an enrollment ceiling increase. However, the school's preferred growth plan does not fully meet the criteria in the expansion amendment application. Staff has significant concerns with the size and pace of the school's preferred enrollment schedule, especially in the first year of expansion. Consequently, staff recommends the board approve the school's more conservative growth plan rather than its preferred plan. Approving the conservative growth plan is consistent with DC PCSB's past decision-making. Further, the more conservative approach enables Basis DC Public Charter School to grow carefully. Rapid growth may result in operational and programmatic challenges the school could otherwise avoid. Basis DC Public Charter School representatives are available to answer the board's questions.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Calvary Cooper, and I am the current head of school of BASIS DC. I am joined here by a few members of our board and our financial team, as well as our former head of school, Mr. Alexander Cobalt, who can all put a face to their own names and introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Debbie Vini. I am a member of the board of directors at BASIS and also the founder and CEO of a nonprofit called Agency. And shall I let others introduce themselves, or do I seize the moment and get into saying things that I hope might be persuasive?
If
I think we
people
can.
could just introduce themselves, that'd be great.
Hi, Public Charter School Board and staff. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Alexander Cobalt, and I am last year's head of school for BASIS DC Public Charter School.
Well,
Good evening, everyone. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Nope, you're good, Deanna. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deanna Rowe. I'm the executive director for the BDC nonprofit charter holder.
I'm Chris Ferguson. I'm the vice president of growth for BASIS Ed.
Hi, I'm Tom Bickert. I'm the chief financial officer for the BASIS schools.
Hi, I'm Amanda Kincaid, manager of financial planning and analysis.
That looks like everybody. Okay, thank you, BASIS team. Welcome. And do you have some remarks that you'd like to share with us?
We do. Thank you so much. Evening, Chairman Cruzy and the rest of the board. It's good to see everyone. So we really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this evening, and want to also just state that we're so grateful for the diligence that the staff has taken in reviewing our application and our comments. And we really appreciate, we know this is tough work, so thank you for the diligence and respect and responsibility that you take with this work. So since our last meeting, our board has met and we've talked about some of the same issues that you talked about. There are a few things that I just wanted to share with you, just to offer some additional context as you think about the proposal that we've laid out and the recommendations that have been made. So I know it's getting late in the day. I'm going to try to be as quick as I can. So I want to hop right to talking about the areas of concern that the staff had expressed. So there were many things that, you know, the staff felt great about it. So I won't belabor that because we love that part. We'll get into the areas that were areas of concern. So the first one, there was a criteria that was described by the staff as having not been met. And this is exactly what was just mentioned, our preferred growth plan. So I know that there was some concern by the staff that it might harm both the BASIS team and possibly families if we were growing too quickly. And I want to just offer a couple things to consider with that. One, when we're thinking about adding these grades to serve students, the sum of those grades are greater than the parts of them. And so if you think about what it means to be able to have that entire body of students, K through 4, and the enrichment, the extra staffing, the things that are available because it's a full operating entity. Those are in fact not possible when you're doing it at another pace. So if you just have kindergartners, it's not just that we're serving the kindergartners in a silo, but they don't benefit from the things that would happen with the whole lower school being in place. And another thing that we wanted to just mention again is we have a tremendous demand for the BASIS model, and we've never had a problem filling seats at BASIS. The earlier we can get these kids in and the more of them we can get in, the better, because I know that one thing that's true is we all want the same thing. We all want high quality options for every kid in the city. And we believe that if you happen to be a first grader rather than a kindergartner and you have to wait 4 years to be able to get into a BASIS school just because you happen to be a little bit older, that's a really unfortunate situation for that kid. And there are a lot of kids that will be in that situation. I'm gonna hop on and talk a little bit more about some of the partially met areas. So one of them was around curriculum and staffing. I'll just say that Basis DC started the school year fully staffed. And our team's ability to retain and attract talent is quite stellar in the city. And I know that one of the things that was mentioned is that it looked like our retention rates were not so great. About 54% of our teachers were retained from last year to this year. I want to talk about that. Sometimes retaining the wrong teachers is not a good thing. And so that's the beauty of the flexibility in the charter model. We are able to pivot and make corrections in real time to make sure that our kids are well served. So we're fully staffed, our kids are doing great, and we feel great about the quality of staff that we have available to our students. I also wanted to talk a bit about inclusiveness. I know that was a concern. And we know that providing earlier access for these families who want Basis students is really a good thing for them. Also, I'm going to just mention that in earlier conversations when we talked about inclusivity, there was some concern about special education, and Basis DC was actually identified as a leading LEA, demonstrating the highest rates of compliance and quality service in terms of delivery to students. So we're very proud of that. It reflects the tremendous work of Calvary and her team, and frankly reflects the feedback that we've taken from this board and how seriously we've taken that and the way that we've worked to really do a great job with that. And finally, I really wanted to talk about the partially met criteria of finances. So this is really related to a change in how long lease terms are reported. And so because of that change in the way that we have to do our financial reporting, it makes things look a bit differently than they would have. So it increased our net. The new lease standards are required, the restatement of our prior year financials, which significantly impacted our net assets. Identifying the lease as an asset corresponding to liability at its present value for fiscal year 21 to 23 required a revision of the statement of financial position, and that reflects a revision in net assets from $5 million to $1.5 million. It's a pretty big gap, but we want you to know that it's an accounting thing. It's not to be interpreted as us being anything other than a solid, fiscally responsible organization. And we have so many notes in front of me. I've got to slow down and I'm talking quickly. Hold on. I'm going to tell you about that. Okay, my notes got a little scratched up, but we are currently operating on a surplus rule. Let me just stop and just speak from my heart. Okay, our preferred model, which is to be able to serve kids K through 4, we believe is a stronger position, not just for Basis, because we will be operating from a facilities perspective, a full lower school with only like one grade in at a time, which is not awesome. But we really believe that we have an opportunity to do something spectacular in the city. We believe that we have an opportunity to open up a lot more opportunities to a lot more kids who could really benefit from them. And that could really, really change the trajectory of student achievement for kids who need it most. I'll wrap up my comments. Thank you so much for considering our application. And we're grateful to you for the service that you provide to the city. And we thank the staff for the diligence and really asking great questions, smart questions. And, we're just here to provide you with some context that we hope helps to explain why we feel the way that we do. But thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Feeney. I think some board members do have some questions. We'll begin with Board Member Carissa Stanley Beatty.
Yes, thank you, Chair Cruzy. And thank you, is it Vinay? I don't want to mispronounce your last name, Miss Vinay.
Oh, thank you. It's Beanie. Thank you for
Beanie.
asking.
Okay, people call me Beatty and it's Beatty, so I. So first of all, thank you for stating the piece that you did about your change in debt ratio specifically being a result in the change in accounting standards. That was actually one of the questions that I was going to ask you. And so can you, just for the record, your restating of your financials was, which period was restated? Could you just say that for the record? And to be clear, the restatement was specifically because of this change in accounting standards, and there was nothing else that was changed in your restatement other than the treatment of the actual lease.
That is correct. I'm going to read from my prepared notes so that I will have this correct. The new lease standard requirement, required the restatement of prior year financials, which significantly impacted Basis DC's net assets, as indicated in the report, identifying the lease as an asset and corresponding liability at present value from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 23. Required a revision on the statement of financial position that reflects a revision in net assets from $5 million to 1.5 million, negative 1.5 million.
Negative 1.5 million.
And now it's at 1.5 though. So our net assets have improved. Our unaudited fiscal year 24 financials say that we are now all the way up to 1.5 in the positive.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I may jump in, I wanted to add that the change in accounting treatment for leases was a GAAP change. It wasn't a change specific to Basis DC. It was just an overall accounting treatment that was adopted by the AICPA and released as ASC Standard 842 that required all organizations that had similar leases to change their accounting methodology. So just wanted to make that clear if others weren't understanding what that accounting treatment was, and it wasn't solely specific to Basis DC.
Thank you for that. My next question is about what staff has recommended in terms of our suggested growth model in comparison to what you all would prefer. So I'll use that language so it's clear, sort of the question that I'm asking. I read that what we are suggesting or what we are recommending for approval in terms of the growth model, your feedback to that is that it would cause your network to have challenges with its debt covenant or debt service. Explain that to me, because it seems as though staff did its own independent analysis and we didn't arrive at the same conclusion.
Before the school answers, I just want to make sure that everyone is clear that the recommended growth plan from staff is actually the school's conservative growth plan and its amendment application. So it's not a growth schedule that PCSB staff independently created, but one that the school submitted as a part of its total enrollment, as a part of its total amendment application.
Thank you, Melody. But so to be clear, though, is the question still applicable? It is still such that the conservative growth pattern or the conservative growth path is one that they assert is not financially viable because it will trigger certain covenants.
Yes, that question is still worthwhile.
Okay. Can we get some color on that?
Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I can add a little bit to the point that we wouldn't be, or Basis DC wouldn't be economically viable. So Basis DC is in a very strong financial position right now. As noted, the adjustment from the accounting changes reduced the net assets, but it did not adjust the cash position. And the cash position has been growing by $1 million year over year for several years. For the year ending June 30th, 2024, the cash position is about $7.5 million. And a year from now, the cash position would be about $8.5 million. And that comes with outstanding days cash on hand as well. So the concern is if the conservative method of growth is implemented, the financial strength will be eroded to a degree. It won't create a deficit in year one, but the investment that will result in getting into a new facility will cause deficits in year 2 and 3, which will cause the metrics that you're referencing to erode and be borderline on the compliance, and thus would really weaken the Basis DC financials. When you compare the preferred method, the school would operate at a much greater surplus, the cash burn would be much less, and the overall financial position would be much stronger. I hope that answers your question on the debt service portion of the concern.
Somewhat. Let me peel this back a little bit. So you referenced 7.5 million in cash, I think you said as of June 30, 2024. Was that your number?
Correct.
Okay. And so what does that translate into in terms of days of cash on hand?
That was approximately 186 days.
Okay.
And that number's, I'm sorry, I was going to say that number's unaudited. The audit hasn't been conducted yet, but our internal calculation calculates it at 186 days.
As of June 30, 2024. Correct. Okay. And then you made a statement that the conservative growth model, I think you said it wouldn't, year one, you would be okay, but year two, you said it would erode.
I should say year 0 would be okay. Year 1, the financial strength would erode as the facility under consideration would be vastly underutilized.
Okay. So in terms of the covenants, you made a statement that the covenant would be borderline. Tell me what that means from a financial perspective, because a covenant is a covenant, right? So either you meet it or you don't. When you say borderline, you would meet it without enough cushion for you to be comfortable. Tell me where you actually are from a covenant perspective, if you follow the conservative path. Where are you from a covenant perspective?
So the two main covenants that we measure against are the days cash on hand, and our minimum requirement is 45 days. So we would be borderline meeting that criteria, and the debt service coverage ratio for the debt liability that the organization has, and that ratio is a 1.2 minimum on an annual basis, and we will be borderline meeting that covenant as well.
And the 1.2, does that come from a lender or is that some internal target?
No, that's from a lender requirement.
That's from your lender. Okay. And that debt service requirement is for multiple facilities or one? Talk to me about what's in that number.
Yeah, there are multiple facilities into that number. The Basis DC is part of the Basis network, and and it's the network as a whole that needs to meet the 1.2 debt service coverage ratio.
So it's an aggregate number.
It is, and it's basically it's a liquidity measurement. So if your schools are operating in a surplus and cash flow positive, then you will be above the 1 significantly and have some cushion. If you are not, and you're break even or running at a deficit, then that individual school would be below a 1.0 if liabilities exceed assets.
Yep. No, I understand what it is. So your covenant is 120. So then you've projected this out, obviously. I guess I'm trying to get to an actual number. So when you say that you would be borderline, tell me what the number is. And it's not year 0, it would be year 1.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have that number at my fingertips. We didn't calculate it out recently. In the last few weeks, given the entire network has considered into the math.
Okay, but you get where I'm going with this. When you at what I'm trying to reconcile is if there's a conservative growth model that you all have proposed, but that you don't prefer for financial reasons, and it sounds like what you're saying is that that puts you in a position where you're not meeting certain debt service covenants. That's important enough for me to ask the question. And so in writing, it said that you didn't meet the covenants, but what I thought I heard you saying here tonight is that you would be borderline. Those two things are not the same. So I'm just trying to drill down on what exactly we're saying here.
Sure. So the previous numbers and statement were based on pre-audited numbers. And as we close the books and reconcile all the applicable accounts, could go either way. I think from a conservative standpoint, we always want a cushion and we want to operate conservatively. So if we're anywhere even close to a compliance issue, we want to avoid that in entirety. So I'm not going to give you a number of we're 1.21, so everything's fine, because it's too preliminary really to pinpoint that math, and it's pre-audit, which is likely to change a little bit based on proposed audit adjustments and when we finalize the books.
Sure.
May I jump in with one additional relevant point more from a planning perspective than the specifics of the finance for which Tom is the expert is it also depends highly on the availability in the market for what the real estate options would be for the future facility as to the cost of the facility and the location. We want to be in a place where we can serve a diverse student body, and price has a big impact on what those numbers might be. So that's, I think, why in part it's hard for Tom to give you a specific number.
Sure, I appreciate that. And we can talk more about that. I actually have questions as it relates to that too. I just want to be clear that if we say that there's a concern around finances and that a particular path or suggestion or whatever is recommended from staff, even aside from tonight, if we make the statement that that particular path poses financial challenges and puts the LEA in a position where it wouldn't meet a covenant, that's a pretty hard and fast statement. And so I just want to be clear for LEAs and for staff that if that's not true, then we shouldn't say it, right? Because that's a pretty concrete thing. It sounds like what you're saying is that there's concern that depending on the cost of the space, the cost of the facility, it could compromise your position and put you perhaps in a place where you don't want to be, which I understand. Essentially, less expenses are always better than more expenses, and you're going to be in a better financial situation if you have more enrollment. That is intuitive, and I understand that. But to say that less students would put you in a position where you trigger a covenant, that's a very serious statement. And so that was the sort of the purpose of my question. Let me take it a step further. So even regardless of whether or not the covenant is triggered, is there support from the broader basis network that would backfill some of that concern in terms of financials for some period of time? Or is the concern that there is not broader support from the national network for the conservative growth path, to be clear?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that, and then I'll turn it over to Deanna. She can probably add more color. The real answer is yes, there could be support. I don't want to commit to it. But it is an option when evaluating options if we're in that position. But I'd like Deanna to probably answer that a little more specifically than I just did.
Sure. Thank you, Tom. Good evening again, members. So there, as a network, we have the larger opportunity to support our schools just as we would in an expansion state. But from an operating perspective, ideally, every school stands on its own. We would never expect the DC, the revenue that we receive from DC to be transferred to the operations to support another school. That would not be appropriate, but rather we can use a strong financial position of the separate nonprofit entity to lift up the overall operations of the nonprofit organization. So when we talk about it in terms of debt service coverage ratios and days cash on hand, we're looking at the individual nonprofit entity that needs to hit their own margins so that then they can also support the larger network in meeting the overall obligations of that obligated group. And when we think about it in terms of the application itself, we recognize that, again, with what we call year zero, which would be the year that we would identify a school leader, bring that school leader on for training, despite not having a school, the identification of a facility, all of the due diligence that's required as part of that, all of the improvements that would need to be done to the facility before it opens, with the expectation that all of that work would happen to support the full range of the enrollment, regardless of how large or small it would be when we start. When we looked at that in considering our application submission, we recognize, and not only from a financial perspective, but more importantly, from an academic and programmatic perspective, opening up with K4 is what our program is. It allows us to staff it in a way that every student has the opportunity to access to the specials that are components, important components of our basis program. And so if you have a K1 school, you can't necessarily have a full-time specials person. So it makes the staffing of the school complicated and doesn't allow us to execute the model as it's been designed. That's one, that's the primary drive for opening with a K4 as opposed to a K1 and then adding grade levels. But from a financial perspective, going back to all of those startup costs in year zero, they are all the same costs, whether we open with 150 students or 300 students. So to your point, it is very important that as we enroll, the more students we have, the quicker we are able to account for that debt that is accrued in year zero, refill those coffers, and then continue to operate in a positive manner.
Understood. I get that, and thank you for saying that. To your point, if you're going to need facilities, unless you are able to scale down, which I have questions about in terms of the type of facility that you secure, you're right. The costs are going to be relatively the same no matter what your student body is. So I appreciate that point. To the conversation about the facility, what work have you done in locating a building? Will you lease a building? Will you purchase a building? Talk about what work you've done as it relates to that. Obviously, where you're looking to locate is going to significantly affect your occupancy expense. What thoughts have you all put towards that or action?
Right. I'm going to ask Chris to answer some of those. He leads he's a vice president of growth, and so he can speak to you directly. I will share that we have been in search of facilities. It's given our lack of knowledge of what this body's decision was going to be. It was too early to actually commit to things. Things are on the market when they're on the market, but we have been looking at options, and he can certainly provide you some of the detail about some of the sites and things that we've been looking at.
Thank you, Deanna. So yeah, we have looked at a number of options. We are actively pursuing both options potentially for purchase and rehabilitation of the building. Primarily, though, we're focused on lease spaces where we could do a long-term lease, and also potentially really focusing on being able to incorporate the tenant improvements and, put that over time to be able to make that an affordable cost. Again, to reduce those upfront costs, but there's still the costs related to furniture and just outfitting the school and everything like that. We're primarily looking at something that would serve as a nice feeder into the current location. So a feeder both in terms of the number of students, so having 4 sections of each grade level at scale, and then as well as location within the district. So we're really looking at things that do have access for outdoor space for our younger students that is reasonably proximal to the current location. So siblings could be, it's not an undue burden on parents to be able to have students at both the upper school and the primary school. And then really looking at just any facility that will meet the high expectation of, delivering a quality education and a quality facility to the students. And so, as Deanna said, the program is really a component of that. So finding a space that's a balance between the amount of tenant improvement that needs to be done and the square footage. But again, it's delayed a little bit in terms of our search. We have worked with Susan Cade, who spoke earlier for the previous school, on finding different locations. And as soon as we know the actual number and timeline to be able to serve, we're very ready to be able to press go very, very fast.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then just one last question for now. Given that you know what staff's recommendation to us is it your intent, if we approve the conservative growth pattern, would you move forward?
I think I want to highlight that Basis DC, we've been open to continuing the communication and partnership with you all. And so the conversation will not be closed, but I would like to kick this to Deanna to give an answer on this matter.
So as the board has looked at this, and Debbie can certainly jump in as well, because the board has been discussing what our options are. We really would like this school in DC to be able to benefit in the same way that all of our other schools in the network do, by providing our students an earlier access to the BASIS program and providing grades K through 4, so that there is a transition into our 5th grade. We have obviously demonstrated that we can be successful, and the students, more importantly, are successful without that opportunity. But when we look at the opportunity and the success of the schools across the network, you can't help but attribute some of that longer term success, the higher achievement in certain areas, to the K4 program. Being able to implement it with minimal financial risk is what is most prudent for the board. And so depending upon facilities, there are a number of factors that would need to be considered. But the reality is that we want to be able to implement our program in the way that it has been designed, which is with the K4 program. So if we're not able to do that, we would likely say we're not going to do a primary program in DC. We're not going to be able to execute on it in the manner in which it was designed and the way that we have demonstrated success in other regions. We believe in the K4 model, opening it up to all grades at the same time. And we also believe that that's the most financially prudent way to proceed.
Mm-hmm. I'll add, from a board perspective, we take our fiscal responsibility very seriously. What we don't want to be is in front of this board with that sort of a problem. And we're going to make sure as a board that that does not happen. So we don't even get close to something that looks like it could put us on a path to not being as fiscally strong as we want to be, because we all know no matter how good everything else at a school may be, if your financial house is not in order, you're not going to stand. And so you would hold us to that same scrutiny. And we're self-policing in this case.
Right. I guess the one other thing that I'd like to add for the board's consideration is that we understood this when we submitted our expansion request. We knew what we wanted, but we were also told by the team that our application wouldn't be considered if we didn't include a path in the slow growth model. So we did our best to present a model that would work. It's not ideal for us. It's not what we wanted, but we did want to have the opportunity to be before you as a body and to have you consider our request as we intended to execute. But again, we're compelled to submit the model that met with what staff's conditions and requirements were at the time.
Thank you for this. I think we have a number of questions still coming before you. I'm going to send it next to Vice Chair Sandman.
Thank you. My colleague, Member Stanley Beatty's last question was my only question, but I'm going to repeat it. I support an expansion of Basis DC. I support an expansion despite the fact that there are a significant number of empty seats, both in the public charter schools and in the DC public schools. Your seats are high quality seats, and I don't believe there's any surplus of high quality seats in the District of Columbia. At least in your current configuration, I think there's proven demand for your seats. That's why I'm willing to support an expansion. But your preferred growth trajectory is too much, too fast for me. I agree with the recommendations of the staff. So I am willing to vote to support an expansion of Basis DC on the conservative growth trajectory that was included in your application and the staff recommends. I will not vote to approve an expansion along your preferred model. So I think I heard the answer. My question was going to be, and I think my colleague, Member Stanley Beatty posed it perfectly. Can you make do with the conservative growth model? Or are you telling us that if we approve that model, you're not going ahead?
I'm going to say that if you approve it, it certainly leaves open the opportunity, but the reality of us actually acting on it is not likely.
I appreciate that. And whether to proceed with the conservative growth model is a matter of your business judgment. We may think you could make it work. That's your decision, not ours. And I admire your fiscal conservatism. If it is conservative, that's your decision. Thank you for your directness.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sandman. Board Member Rodriguez.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think I'm where Vice Chair Sandman is, and I say that with a great deal of admiration for what you do, for the criteria you meet, for the fact that you are clearly a school that offers high quality seats that are worth expanding. So I think I would just say, like, I've heard a number of reasons why it would be beneficial to go with your preferred plan. I will point out that all of those things would come to light under the conservative plan just a few years later. And in fact, there could have been another conversation where we said, well, you're only going to get to half or 2/3 of the seats you're asking for in perpetuity. But this is a solution in which the students and the dollars that come with them, are in fact granted to you in perpetuity, just on a slightly different timeline. So I just want to point that out in terms of sort of what that means fiscally. Whatever fiscal pain there is, it is, as you say, as I think has been said already, something that is temporary. And the question is, can you plan around that or not? And I totally agree with Jim that, that's your decision, not ours. I will say, though, the staff's objections and concerns, I haven't heard as much from you on those. And so I guess my one question would be, the one concern is simply starting with that many students all at once, right? And staffing up for that. I realize you've done this elsewhere. I think you tell us it's your model. Can you, honestly say you can't point to a single instance elsewhere in your network where that didn't have deleterious effects where, in terms of the student outcomes. Like, you can't point to one school where the first few years of its operation with that big bang are different in terms of the results from what happens when you actually reach a mature steady state.
Sure, I think
Mr. Rodriguez, and I'm sorry, Deanna, just to jump in on the first part that you said, I want to flip the script just slightly back to the board members to consider the opposite, which is that we all agree that the staff proposal from the Public Charter School Board gets us to the same endpoint. While financial conservatism is an important aspect for the board from an academic standpoint as the former head of school, I really want to stress what Deanna said earlier, which is if we are all agreeing we're getting to the same endpoint, but we're saying to you guys at those beginning years, it's so academically important for us to be able to fully staff that school profile for the student outcomes themselves. That's our position in reverse from what you just said, which is, yes, we are all getting to the same endpoint. Financial conservatism is important to us, but it is important in that it meets the end of providing the best impact to the most kids. And we simply cannot hire the teachers we would normally hire at every other basis K-4 campus under that conservative model. It's not just the long-term financial impact, it's that in that first year, we're going to be missing teachers who'd be teaching engineering, who'd be teaching robotics, who'd be teaching Mandarin, who'd be teaching art, who'd be teaching drama, much less those core subjects, which is a key part of our model. Deanna is probably the best one to answer the historical trajectory across the network. But I really wanted to emphasize that point is we agree with you. We're getting to the same end goal. If we do the slow growth model, we can't hire the teachers who are there to teach the students and be the excellent professionals we know them to be.
So I think to the historical context of the enrollment and the academic success, every market is different. I think what's important to focus on here in DC is that we looked at the opportunity that was available to us. We looked at the demand. We did our own research to say, there's financial risk, right? We don't know that all of these students are going to come. We may hit somewhere between our preferred 318 and the recommended 150. But what we need to do is know and make a decision when we obtain a facility, when we build the budget, when we do our enrollment, that we can be academically responsible and fiscally responsible, right? So there are some adjustments that can be made as we move forward, but using the slow growth recommended model doesn't allow us the flexibility that we would have if we had our preferred model. Our preferred model allows us to gauge our own financial viability, to take additional risk where we believe it's appropriate to do so, to make programmatic modifications if we needed to. But with this slow growth model, you're tying our hands. And so then we really have to say, are we willing to devalue what we believe is important in the academic program that we've developed and that we've executed on everywhere else, and then have to make changes, and then make changes to that and accommodations. We believe in what we do. We have demonstrated success. It hasn't been without challenges in certain regions where we've operated, but we've gone in with our eyes wide open and we've been prepared to make the modifications as necessary when needed.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate both of your answers.
Thank you. Next, Treasurer Wright.
Hi, Basis team. I did not get to see you during the last public hearing. I will tell you before I start that I did come around in terms of your expansion request. So I'm going to just start there so that you hear this, but I do have questions. So my first question is, I actually appreciate, Alexander, how you flipped it on us. I think what I want to make sure you understand and hear, Basis team, actually agree exactly with what Vice Chair Salmon said in terms of what you offer to the city, what you've done, and I would love to see that happen for younger children. I like to also see it, and Alexander heard this from me directly, I like to see it happen for more children, particularly children who look like me. Let me just be real and come from background that I come from and come from neighborhoods where I currently live, which is east of the river. So I would like it to be more accessible for that so that you don't have rare cases of showing where you've been able to do that, but it is the norm that BASIS does for everyone in this city. So I want to push that first and foremost, because having a quality seat that doesn't serve all students causes the question about where the quality is coming from. So I just want to make sure we understand and go from there. Two things that came up for me, which I don't think I realized would happen once you got to growth. It looks like you would backfill to the extent that you had open seats, recognizing the demand for your program. So I recognize attrition is not something that happens very often, but it looks like you would backfill basically up and through 5th grade, and then you would stop. And that for me is, I feel like I know what you're going to tell me why you do it based off the rigors, et cetera. But when you look at serving from kindergarten to 12th grade and only having those entry grades at that point, talk to me about that. Help that make sense to me, particularly when you're saying to me in the same breath that you want to serve as many students, you want as much of a diverse population as possible, et cetera. And then I'm going to come back to the bigger picture I'm going to come back to the conservative versus preferred growth. But just talk to me about, like, why not at this point, particularly when you look at the gap in the city in terms of seats, but then also whether they're quality seats, but like middle school, right, is still such a big deal in this city. I don't know what's happening in the other BASIS places. That's not where that rhymed a little bit. I'm not responsible for that, right? But why stop at 5th grade? If you're going to go that far, why not at least look at 7th, 8th grade? I do understand what happens in 9th and beyond.
I think I'd like to start and answer this question. Nice to see you again. You hit on a point that's very near and dear to my heart, just offering a high quality seat to students who look like us. As a Black woman educator, as a Black woman head of school at BASIS DC, I share your sentiments. As a mom of a student who I am hoping and praying to be able to attend a school who offers high seat, such a high quality of a seat as BASIS DC does. I get it. And I think that's why we're really pushing for this, because allowing us to open with our preferred growth model will allow us to reach a more diverse population of students who otherwise would not have the opportunity based off of their in-boundary circumstances. And so I just wanted to share that with you for a moment, and then I'll kick it over to Alex to answer the second half of that question.
Thank you, Head of School Cooper. I hope the first year is off to a great start.
I think that there's a really big facilities issue with adding all students at all grade levels. And candidly, we have always been an open enrollment school for all members of the District of Columbia. We just haven't had seat capacity very often for a large number of seats above 5th grade. If you look at our historical enrollment values, we've definitely enrolled kids in 6th and 7th and in 8th. It's just very sporadic. And that comes from the confines of our current facility. It doesn't come necessarily from only a curricular perspective, though Ms. Wright, you're certainly right that is also important to us. We don't want to admit a kid and then set them up for failure. And so I think the real question again is kind of, even with the current parent community, Ms. Cooper and I talk to the families a lot because they'll ask us the same question. Does this mean there'll be more middle school seats in the future? And I think this is another moment where I would flip the script a little bit with this board, which is that in a world where there's conservative growth and we are absolutely minimizing financial risk and opening small and opening another small facility or another challenging facility, as I will politely call our building, that locks us into never, ever in a million years being able to offer more middle school seats. But in the world in which this board is open to providing a larger number in the model that we prefer to a more a larger number and also a more diverse number of students, that allows us to open the door in the future for facilities rearrangement that could see us improve our middle school seat enrollment counts or backfilling in those larger grade levels. We have never been in any way categorically opposed to that.
Okay, so I just want to make sure what I'm hearing you say, the backfilling right now is facility restricted, not programmatic restricted. Okay, that's good to know. I am like, again, as I shared just between the public hearing and where you are, I support you all growing. I think that we need to have more options like BASIS available for young people in this city. Our sector, though, cannot afford the level of growth that you all are. I understand that it is preferred, but our job is not just to think about BASIS as offering quality seats, but to, one, push all of our schools to get to quality seats, which is why we have a very rigorous Aspire bar that is going to continue to hold schools accountable and push them to ensure that we are growing children and moving them to proficiencies at the rate and pace that they deserve and that they need in order to compete. Our job is to think about what's happening as an entire sector. And when we look at enrollment trends and when we look at what we have done over the years to address growth or lack of growth, to address the pandemic, to look at what is happening with our schools, we have found that to do the days, and I know the days that you all are asking for of schools coming and getting 8 charters at a time and opening up, and they open up full grade configuration. I was part of opening up full grade configuration, full grade configuration, right? And this is, so I know those days. Unfortunately, that is not where we are at this point. And I am like, Jim, at the end of the day, you all have to make that decision, just like you have to look and figure it out. What I would say to you, Ms. Rowe, Ms. Vini, as you all think about it as a board, knowing what you do in BASIS and what you have the ability to do, totally appreciate you saying, Ms. Rowe, you will not spend Texas funds in DC and DC funds in Texas and all of that. As a steward of public money, the money needs to be where the children are and it belongs to that state and or city. So 100% would not ask to do that. But thinking about the impact that you have had in DC, what it could look like to grow in our context. I think a lot of times we get really comfortable thinking about DC as this metropolitan city. It is a 10-mile square city that only has, what, 78,000 children total, 45,000 of which are within our sector. And so as we think about what this looks like, we have to think about all of our schools. We have to think about what it looks like and the impact of such decisions, which is when I was sharing my public statement before, thinking about the immediate, the children that you're going to get are going to pull from other schools. And I get the argument of, well, if they're not in a quality seat right now, that is actually our job to deal with through Aspire and through our programming to hold those schools accountable and not to necessarily do it. And ultimately it's the parent choice, right? The parent choice to make their decisions. Parents make decisions with their feet. They make decisions, well, technically, I guess with their fingers when they choose the lottery. But at the end of the day, I want to see you all grow. Believe it or not, even though I said in the last one in June that I did not support it, I do want to see you grow. I want to continue to see you push to continue to serve more children. I want to come to more graduations and see the power of where those children are going and the things that they are about to do and the way that they are going to change this world. And I believe you are creating that. I also know that we have an obligation to our sector. We have an obligation to the other 62, 63 LEAs to be thoughtful, as well as our counterpart. We are a city, and parents, regardless of our shingle, want great schools for their children, and we need to be thoughtful and mindful of that in our planning. So I would ask that you would, if we think about this, we also that you will think about how you can support. I also want to reiterate what Board Member Stanley Beatty said, which is we want to hear what you're saying. And if you are saying that financially it does not work for you, I actually appreciate, I can't remember if it was Ms. Rowe or Ms. Beanie who said it, at the end of the day, the school is a business. And I think you all have watched the last couple months of board meetings. And the obligation over public funding is something that this board will always hold true and will always hold top of mind. And so if it's not something that you can do, then I actually appreciate you not being able to do that. I would say be thoughtful as you think about, I know I'm speaking to people particularly, like I think about on here on this board, Tom and Chris, you do this for a living, right? Like school facility space is high need here, thinking about how you might be able to sublease spaces to schools on an interim basis and thinking of interim basis, but thinking about how you might be able to work with other schools who might be able to use space in the interim while you're building it out. If there are ways, I know it's hard in DC in particular for you to build out over time, but just to be as creative as possible while you recognize the restrictions on us. But I do want you to hear my support for Basis to grow and to continue to offer programming, particularly as you continue to select high quality heads of schools like Alexander and Calvary. I think that's a good sign of what you're doing. So thank you.
Member Wright, may I ask you a question and follow up to
please.
your comment? First, let me say thank you very much for your change in position, change in heart. I appreciate that. I'm curious now as we think about compromise and being able to figure out what might work. Is it the K1? Is it the board's position that the slow growth needs to be at K1? Or is it the 150 students? Or is it a combination of both? And if we came back and said, we can do this with 212 students at a K4, is that something that we should be exploring? Is there some kind of a compromise here so that as we're trying to say it, assuming I've heard from enough of you to say we probably don't have our support for our preferred model. You haven't all spoken yet, but I see where this might be going.
Mm-hmm.
I hesitate to throw this out there as an option at this point for your consideration, but I would like to know if there is it that the board it must be only a K1 and grow a grade level at a time? Or is it should only be 150 students because that's the impact that the city can bear? Or is there a number in between that the city can bear that if we can figure out a way that we can execute on that number without compromising our academic program, it would be something that you would consider?
So I think the first thing I'm going to do is defer to the staff, right? They're the experts in terms of doing that and doing that work. I will tell you that for us as a board, we have adopted this conservative path, which is really the thought of adding no more than 2 grades and 150 students. But I will, and that makes sense just based off what we've seen across the board and the information that we receive from the staff. But they do this work deeply and think about it deeply and think about I think we all think about all 63, but they can tell you all 60. They probably saying, Chantel, the number is not 63, it's whatever, but they can tell you exactly how many, what it looks like, et cetera. So I would actually pass that to either Melody or Dr. Walker Davis.
Thank you, Treasurer Wright. First, I want to just acknowledge all of the hard work on both the part of Basis DC and the staff in terms of getting us to tonight's conversation, the many, many conversations that we've had at the individual level, as well as this public dialogue. And I want to underscore where Ms. Sampson started, which is, yes, we have a staff recommendation. And yes, we did make a request for the school to submit in its application a growth trajectory that was in line with our past practice and our conservative growth model. But I want to underscore it was Basis DC's submission that we are making a recommendation on. And so I want to be clear that we too support a strong financial position for schools and would not be making a recommendation or asking schools to take financial risk. And so our assumption is that a conservative growth proposal that was submitted in the application would be one that would be financially viable. And so I want to make sure that that is understood. Secondly, we did not have that creative approach to consider in this application, and we would be willing to do the analysis to come back and make a recommendation for the board if that is what Basis DC preferred. But we were pretty clear from Basis DC that your preferred model was what you really wanted to explore, and we did not have anything else to consider besides the growth, conservative growth trajectory until it was submitted. So I say that the door is not closed to considering something between, not between, but something other than the conservative growth model that we've had, but we've not had a chance to analyze that. The concerns that staff has raised, though, about the number of students and the staffing concerns, all of the things that we put in our proposal would remain if you were to open the school with all grades at once. I think you will still have some of the same challenges around staffing. You will still have some of the concerns that were raised around non-traditional entry points in terms of who might be able to access those opportunities and might end up at your school through an open lottery process, just in terms of awareness and when those patterns happen in our enrollment process. So I'm not going to say that there wouldn't be some of the same concerns if we were to look at that proposal, but we were not given such a proposal to look at.
I know Secretary Adama-Fanian has some questions. I just want to quickly offer that the proposal that a LEA submits is reviewed by staff against a standard of approval. And it is that standard of approval that is based on what staff know about our needs here in the district. So what we have here is a difference between perhaps your perspective and your experience and track record in other environments. And our staff's responsibility is to apply what you have given us against our standard of approval. And that is why wherever this conversation goes after tonight's meeting, we will look to the staff's recommendation based on any kind of updated proposal you may offer us. Secretary Adama-Fanian.
Thank you. Thank you, Basis team, for your presentation, and to my colleagues for asking some pretty awesome questions here. One of the things I've sort of picked up on and have paid attention from the beginning of all this was Basis, you all's continued statement around really seeking a diverse student population. And I am, in addition to all the things that were discussed here tonight, I'm particularly interested in that just because, again, of the quality of seat that you all provide young people, full stop. But the other thing that I heard tonight that gave me a bit of pause was the piece around potentially, should this all go through, seeking a facility that's in close proximity, I guess, to what would then become the upper school. Is that what I heard? Okay. Is that correct?
It is one of the consideration points of a facility that we're looking at, is the ability to serve as a true feeder into that current facility. Yes.
Right, with proximity being a lever to sort of choosing that particular school or site, correct? Okay.
Potentially, that is one of them. Another one is really looking at areas that will fit that metric, as well as fitting the metric of where there aren't a lot of high quality seats, and that there are a couple of niche areas. There's not a ton, but there are a couple of areas in the district in which there is an overlap between those two things.
Got you. I think what I am thinking through is what are some of the things that you all are thinking about, or some of the experiences that you've had with respect to attracting diverse student populations to a school site? Again, what I have in my head, I'm not familiar with all the pockets, if you will. But I'm thinking, because I see your school is somewhere in Northwest. I just looked it up. But I'm trying to think about, okay, so how would you all make sure that you achieve the diversity that you want to achieve? Like, what does that look like for you all? How are you thinking about that?
I can start with one of the ways that we have been very proactive in achieving that goal is by adding the equitable preference access for students who are entering the lottery this year, in which we have already enrolled 8 of the 10 seats that we had available for that. In addition to offering those seats for those students to come into the school, we have been very intentional about the staffing model at the current school. And so about a third of our staff is literally dedicated to student support, social emotional development. And so all of those things are, and I can talk more about that as well, but I want to kick it over to Alex, and then I can come back and talk about exactly what's happening at the school level with the current school.
Okay, I'm sorry. Real quick, you said you only have 10 equitable preference seats for your current, okay.
Yes, for the current school.
And that was about 10% of our entering student population for the year. So it's a small number, but we only enter a little over 100 students per year. I want to take a moment to jump in just to clarify what might be a geography mindset difference between those folks on the call who are DC natives or long-term residents and those folks on the call who are not DC natives or long-time residents. When we talk about proximity to the school, we're not talking about something walking distance to Penn Quarter by definition, which is where the current school is located. We're talking about a fairly wide area of the city. And like Chris said, we identified several in-boundary school districts or single member voting districts that we felt like were schools that were in proximity or sites that were in proximity for a strong feeder pattern. And that included all sorts of wards, 4, 5, 2, 6, 7. I think I've listed all of them unless I've somehow forgotten what ward Waterfront is in. So we're not talking about, a little tiny area, just to clarify maybe some colloquial geography differences. In addition, one of the things we shared in our application and continue to share is we are very open to all sorts of things that help make the lives of our families easier, including exploring opportunities for shuttles between the campuses for families. Let's say we open on the closer end or in the north end of Ward 7 or in the south end of Ward 4 or 5. We're very open to different ways of exploring to support the families who might not otherwise have access to the city resources necessary to get their kids to and from the high quality seats that we offer. So in no way are we closing the door on any population within the city. We want to do what we can, how we can to get those students into the seats that we want them to have access to. And Ms. Cooper has been great in interviewing our current families, especially those who are admitted through at risk, and asking them, what are the barriers to getting to school every day? How can we better support you? What does it look like to provide those resources to help ensure that populations traditionally disadvantaged from seats at a school like Basis can get in?
And I appreciate that. Thank you. I think my other question is kind of teasing out the equitable preference. You all selected the 10% of the incoming class or incoming number of seats that you would have, right? Would you entertain any changes to that, any expansion to that at all?
Yeah, I think we've shared that we're open to expanding that to the K4 if approved, for sure.
Well, I mean the percentage, right? That's what I'm speaking. Like, what would that look like in the K4 school? Should that go forward?
Deanna, I don't know if you want to jump in. We haven't discussed a specific number as a team.
That's right. We haven't, but we are committed. I mean, first of all, we do have a diverse population at this point in time, but we recognize that there was opportunity to provide more access to the population should there be the demand for that. So we set it at 10% this year. It's flexible. As Calvary has pointed out, we have the support team in place, but it makes sense to check those supports and make sure that we are able to provide the services as we intended to that population. Learning from that then as we expand and add the primary grades, especially if we are able to do it as a K4 and staff up appropriately for those supports from in a K4 primary school as opposed to just a K1 serving 2 grades. Again, the ability to serve more students and to serve a range of students really impacts on our staffing, which then dictates to some extent decisions that we would make around enrollment preferences. They go hand in hand. I don't think we can speak to one in isolation of the other.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Cruzy, I'm sorry, could I just ask one last question of clarification? I don't want to jump over anybody.
That's fine. We're open for that. Please.
Okay. Ms. Rowe, when you're talking about the last point that you just made in terms of the correlation between enrollment and instructors, when you're making that point on the conservative growth model, I heard you and Mr. Cobalt talk about the types of instructors that you would want to hire. And I think he said something like engineering and like some other like wonderfully robust programming that he mentioned that instructors would be teaching. Those types of instructors are directly correlated. Are they in the conservative model? Like meaning if you moved forward with the conservative growth model, there's still a concern for hiring of instructors. Am I hearing you correctly saying that, or no?
If we have to operate at in the conservative model,
yes,
we're not up. So when we think about our models specifically and our subject expert teachers, when you hire a subject expert teacher, you're looking at potentially at the primary grade, you're looking at somebody who would teach math and science. But they would teach math and science across multiple sections of a grade, and then across grade levels as well. And so you can hire a full-time math science expert when you have a full-time job for that person. If you're locked into just 150 students and you want a subject expert in not only the core content areas, but the specials, mathematically, financially, it just doesn't work.
I understand. Thank you for that. I am I am not a school leader nor a past school leader, so I operate from a little bit of a deficit there. So essentially what you're saying is you wouldn't hire an instructor for just kindergarten or just the first grade. You would want to be able to share them amongst other grades. That's what you're saying. Financially, to make it viable for you.
Not only financially to make it viable, but it is our academic model, right?
Gotcha.
We have subject experts. Our students begin traveling from class to class in the primary school. So the teacher stays put, the kids move to their subject experts along with their learning expert. So you've got a 2-teacher model in every classroom with a subject expert providing that content expertise across multiple grade bands.
I understand. So that's why the scale is so important to you.
Exactly.
I got it. Thank you for that.
Treasurer Wright, I think you have a follow-up question.
Yeah, so I think part of what I want to go back to kind of what Dr. Walker Davis said, and Ms. Rowe, this is sort of a counter to your question to me. You all put this proposal in front of us, right? So one of the things that happens here with us is we vote on what you put in front of us, right? Or after the staff has gone through, you have your conversations, et cetera. They put the information in front of us, we ask questions and we vote. So I just want to be, I think you all, and I'm very direct. Why did you put it in front of us if you weren't really ready to do it? That's honestly my first question, right? Particularly as somebody who's done a 180 around your growth. And then 2, given what you've said, do you want the opportunity to step back now that you know where the board is and think about this before we vote? Because let me tell you what my concern is. My concern is we're going to, if we vote, we're voting on what you put in front of us. That doesn't mean you have to do, right? Like things happen, school building, there are all kinds of things that happen. I want to make sure that we're clear. And it may be in your interest to say, look, let me just get at least a vote for expansion and then we'll come back. And that's fine, like we can go there. But I'm really curious if this was not something that you all could truly put together or really carry out, why did you put it in front of us? And I mean that with all due respect, I really do.
I appreciate that. And so I will answer in kind. it gave us the opportunity to put our true model in front of you. Knowing from staff that our application wouldn't be considered if we didn't include a plan for the preferred model, the slow growth model, the application wouldn't be considered. We were incredibly hopeful that when we had the opportunity to put our preferred model in front of you, to have the opportunity to speak with you, to share not only the passion that we all have for providing the best opportunity for kids, but our models specifically and how it works, that you would consider our proposal. And when I go back to the hearing and reflect on the conversation that we had, and Chair Cruzy really asked us to go back to the team and see what kind of compromise we could come up with and be creative. When we approached the team and asked about that creativity, there wasn't an exchange at that point in time of ideas. There wasn't an opportunity, I'm going to say, to do that. They weren't open to a conversation about it. They simply said, put what you want in front of us. And so when we talk about the other obstacles as they brought up, would it matter what we put in front of you if the current concern is still, you're not sure that we're going to be able to staff our school, except that we have staffed our school. And whether you look at the DC statistics or the national statistics that say it's a challenge, I won't argue those statistics, but that's not basis. We didn't have a challenge I won't say it wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a walk in the park. Calvary was exceptional in her hiring decisions, but Calvary was able to fully hire her team this year. We are staffed in our other schools. And so I understand where the staff is coming from their concerns, but they're not speaking from the experience that we have there. So when we look at opportunities, when we look at the concerns that they have, and when we try to present a case or have a conversation about that, there wasn't an opportunity to say, well, what if you did this or did that? Yes, we could submit a different proposal, but really we know what we want. I'm coming to you now to say, as a board, if you are willing to set some parameters other than the slow growth model and our model, if there's something in between that you're willing to consider that would allow us to truly reflect on an opportunity to be a K4, the other things don't change, right? We've shown you a model, a financial model, not our preferred. Can we make it work as a K1 and do the slow growth? We could. Do we want to? No. Is it a risk that we may take? Maybe, but probably not. But it's not about those financials as well. I mean, it is about those, but it's also about the academic model. Are we willing to compromise on our academic model? And if we're not, then are you interested in compromising on your number that would allow us to execute on our academic model? And I don't know if that's a magic number with staff, because we've shown you a budget that works either way. So obviously we can make an adjustment to a continuum in that operations, should we find a facility that's viable. So is there a number beyond 150 that you're willing to give us? And with that number, does there come the permission to serve grades K4 from the get-go?
Okay. Well, I wanted to follow up, because I think it's important to, again, just to reiterate that this was a proposal that you all put in front of us. We take these things very seriously. I'm quite aware of the time, and I know my board members will probably want me to be quiet to vote. That's not how I operate, so they know that. So we're okay. I think it is important to know you put in front of us this proposal. And a lot of times the decisions that come down, and the reason why I'm reiterating this is because a lot of times it's like, oh, the board did this, or the charter board did this, or the staff did this. and I get what you're saying around conversations, and I think what I want you and any other LEA to take away is we want to spend time considering things that really work for you and that you think will work for your school community, and also take in consideration the things that we also have to take into consideration. And with all due respect, this was probably not, I think when the staff is telling you, they're looking and they're thinking about this thoughtfully. And I appreciate the opportunity, what you're saying, to get ahead of us. I think I am disappointed and want to just note that to hear that this model was not one, and maybe it's not, maybe you will sit back and say, this is something that we will support and do big picture, but that this was not a true desired plan, or that this could also result in you making a different decision. That is disappointing. But I respect the autonomy of schools, and I also respect the accountability and obligation that we have as a sector. So thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for these added responses. In a moment, I'll invite a motion. I want to offer that just briefly that I will be voting in support of the staff proposal for two reasons. One, I'm voting in support because of BASIS's steady and consistent track record of excellence in service to your students. And I feel that this proposal, as recommended by the staff, offers an addition to our rich system of choice. And the second reason I find it compelling is the testimony and the idea that expanding this grade span provides an opportunity for BASIS's student enrollment to better reflect the full diversity of our city, and with a stronger representation of students from DC's marginalized communities. I am concerned that there is perhaps a gap in understanding of the track record of success you've had elsewhere and the expertise that our staff have on what the needs and opportunities are here in our city. The standard of approval by our staff is something we take very seriously. So our board votes, we make the votes, we make the decisions, but the staff, as Treasurer Wright put so brilliantly earlier, the staff are the experts. They are the ones that know in detail what the population dynamics are, what enrollment dynamics look like, what the expectations are for what our sector can handle. So I understand the nuance of your request and that you have this evidence of success elsewhere, but context matters. As such, I find the staff recommendation to be a sound compromise, and you'll have to decide from there, should this vote get approved by this board, what you'll do with it. So with that, I will invite a motion.
I motion to approve the BASIS DC Public Charter School to amend its charter agreement, enabling the school's expansion in accordance with the conservative growth trajectory articulated in its charter agreement amendment application.
I second, and I wholeheartedly echo the chair's remarks, and would just encourage, if the vote goes through, the folks on the BASIS team to find a way to work to make it work with us. We would love to see this expansion happen.
Thank you. Secretary Adamafanian, would you please take a roll call vote?
Absolutely. Chair Cruzy?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman?
Aye.
Treasurer Wright?
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty? I got it right.
You
Did I
did.
get it? Okay. Great.
I'm going to vote no. And I want to be clear, my vote is not against the staff recommendation because I think that there's any issue with it. My vote is no because the LEA has said that it's not financially viable. Whether or not we flushed out truth to that or not truth or grayness in that area, that is why I am voting no.
Thank you. Board Member Rodriguez?
Aye.
Board Member Davis?
Aye.
Chairman Cruzy, Chairwoman Cruzy, I'm an aye as well.
Thank you, Secretary Adamafanian. Congratulations, BASIS. And we look forward to your response over the coming weeks. Thank you for this presentation this evening. Thank you for the thorough discussion. Thank you, board members, for the excellent questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, BASIS team. Have a good night. Thank you.
For our final charter amendment request this evening, I would like to welcome back Bijan Lane back to the floor to introduce the request from Inspired Teaching Public Charter School. And I would also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks. And as you join, when you join, before you begin speaking, please introduce yourselves and your titles.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Hello again. My name is Bijan Lane. I am a specialist in the school performance department. DC PCSB staff recommends its board vote to approve Inspired Teaching Demonstration Public Charter Schools request to increase its enrollment ceiling by 16 students, raising the total from 520 students to 536 beginning in school year 2025-26. DC PCSB did not receive any public comments regarding this proposal.
Good evening. I'm Kate Keplinger. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Inspired Teaching. I don't have too much to add. We have we appreciate your consideration of our request. We have a small, relatively simple request for our enrollment ceiling increase. We're asking for an increase of just 16 students, and that is really just so that we can have a little bit of a buffer in our enrollment. Our enrollment target has been 520 students for the last several years, and that will remain our enrollment target because that's what works best in our building. But occasionally with the way the lottery works and we offer a few seats, and some people say yes, some people say no, we end up with a couple students over 520, and this would just allow us to get fully funded for all of the students that are in our building. We have robust wait lists at all of our grades. This is really just sort of that space to give us a little bit of a buffer if we need to end up with a couple extra kids in our school building. If you have any other questions, we're happy to answer them. I think our head of school is here as well.
Welcome back, Ms. Keplinger. Thank you for the update. I don't know if we have no questions, then I'm going to invite a
Wait,
motion.
Leah, before you, I don't have questions, but I do have a comment. I think Kate, you said the head of school is also here. I do just want to reiterate, I cannot remember if I said it last month or not, but I do want to just reiterate the expectation. I get why you've asked for this minimal increase. I want to make sure that you're clear that the expectation is that you will operate within the enrollment ceiling and that we're not here every year, every couple of years asking for these small incremental enrollment ceiling increases over time. This is something that we have now seen a couple times come in front of the board, and I really just want to reiterate the expectation that schools are operating within enrollment ceilings, and if not, are going through a full process of reevaluating where you need to be and making that request known wholeheartedly and not in these kind of small things because you got 10 here or 5 here. Okay.
Yep, understood. I think that's why we did it a little bit more than, like, I didn't just say 522, but we actually don't have a building that has space to go above that. And so it would be a much bigger decision facility wise and everything else if we were to try to increase any further. So I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Board members, I'll invite a motion.
I move to approve the charter amendment request of Inspired. I'm sorry. My screen just went off. I move to approve the charter amendment request of Inspired Teaching Public Charter School and approve the DC PCSB board chair to sign the amendment on the board's behalf.
Second.
Thank you. Secretary Adamafami, would you please take a roll call vote?
Yes, Chairwoman Cruzy.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Salmon.
Aye.
Treasurer Wright.
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez.
Aye.
Board Member Davis.
Aye.
And I am an I.
Thank you. Congratulations. And thank you for your patience this evening, Ms. Kemper and team.
Thank you. We appreciate your work.
Okay, next, board members, we will vote on the consent calendar. Would any board member like to remove an item from the calendar for further discussion or state a recusal for the record? If none, I will entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
I move to approve all items on the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you. Take another roll call vote.
Chairwoman Cruzy.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman.
Aye.
Treasurer Wright.
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Board Member Davis.
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez.
Aye.
And I'm an I.
Thank you very much. Now, is there any new business?
Other than we want our executive director to be better. I move for that to happen.
I second that motion. Wait, is that a real?
That's a vote. That's a vote. Yes.
I'm an I.
All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the September 16th, 2024 board meeting.
Second.
Last roll call vote.
My pleasure. Chairwoman Cruzy.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman.
Aye.
Treasurer Wright.
Aye.
Board Member Davis.
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez.
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Okay. And I am an I. Did I get it ready? I think so.
Thank you all, Dr. Walker Davis. I really do hope you feel better. I see you coughing and all of that. We're thinking about you. So
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
All
Good
right.
night, everybody.
Good night, board.
Right.
Yeah.
Better soon.
Bye-bye.